The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod and we are webcasting to you live from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders headquarters in Tarzana, California. Welcome to the show. Today is Wednesday. It is August 1st. How did we get to August? I just don't know, but we're going to be with you for the next 3 hours talking about autism and topics surrounding autism, trying to see if we can help each other, myself included, to be the best possible parent, teacher, practitioner. We want to be the most effective, efficient member of the team that we can possibly be, right? I know that's important to me. I hear from you guys that it's important to you, whether you are a parent, teacher, or practitioner. It's something that, and if we could gain tools and skills so that we can be more effective for our kids to help them to reach their potential, why wouldn't we want to, right? And the truth of the matter is that there are so many things that we can do. Got lots I want to talk to you about today. I really was struck this morning. I was reading an article in the Atlantic Monthly, and I did not get all the way through it because I was pressed for time this morning, but reading through a mom who wrote an article called Things I've Learned Because My Child Has a Disability, something like that. I'm paraphrasing horribly. But in any case, really striking article about some of the truths of what it's like when your life has a child on the autism spectrum. And this is a case where, the mom is very frank in saying that her child is very profoundly affected, and some of what she goes through and how different her life is. But I have to say that wherever you are, wherever your child is on the spectrum, and let's face it, there's a big, huge spectrum, there's hope. And even for this woman who was writing this story, and I want to get to the end of it before the end of today, but she has some huge challenges with her son, and still she manages to stay hopeful, and she, says, well, my child has difficulties with this, and this, but he has a wonderful smile. And I hear that hope in her, and I hope that all of you have that hope. And I know that today our topic is ABA for beginners, but I really want to take a little time at some point today in our busy schedule to talk about challenging behavior and remind all of you that think about what the worst thing is that's going on in your day on a regular basis right now. Whatever it is, I want you to know you have the potential to have that change. It doesn't matter what the challenging behavior is, and I know you guys write in and say, well, my child is engaging in this behavior. Does this have to do with autism or does it not? And I will tell you that from time to time we go over the diagnostic criteria of what autism involves, right? And sometimes it's a symptom of autism. Sometimes it's just a byproduct that comes because of some of the symptoms, but it isn't actually a symptom. For instance, like biting and hitting and kicking and violence and all those things. Rages or inability to control themselves emotionally. Not on the autism spectrum diagnosis criteria. It's not there. It doesn't mean it's not a real problem in your home, but I will be honest with you that whether it is on the list of criteria, the symptoms, or not, it doesn't matter. We can change the behavior. We can. We know we have the knowledge to do that. So one of the things that we do here on the show is talk about ABA. It's one of the things that we do because applied behavior analysis is the only scientifically proven effective treatment for autism. And by the way, it's effective for all of our kids, and it's effective for us as well. I know. Can you hear the angels sing? It's effective in working with the people we work with and other people's children. ABA is very effective at changing behavior. And if we can look at all behavior that our children are engaging in as communication, and figure out, okay, what is the child communicating to me, and how can I give them another skill so that they can communicate more effectively without having to put their head through a plate of glass or having to hit someone or having to bite someone. How can I give that skill to the child? We will change their lives and our lives for the better. And we can do that. We know research has shown time and time again. And I know that some of you are resistant and think, yes, but that's for those kids who aren't as severely affected as my child. And I want you to know you need to look back at the research. That is not the case. This is effective, and it doesn't matter if the child has a dual diagnosis, a triple diagnosis, if there are other things on board. If we are consistent in how we deal with behavior and we use these tools that ABA provides us, yeah, that's the hard part, is using them on a consistent basis and being creative with them. It's not easy. And I will be the first person to admit to you that I do not always do the best job, right? And so sometimes I do a really horrible job because I'm learning on the job as a parent. But if we keep trying, what we see is that the behavior changes. So no judgments. Please know that, I am not an ABA expert. I'm not an expert in autism. I am like you. I'm in the trenches with my child and trying to figure it out on a daily basis, right? But I will tell you what I have seen in my life, because my son was diagnosed at 2.5, was very profoundly affected at that point, had regressed into autism, lost virtually all of his language, was having terrible tantrums, was self-injurious, was violent, was biting, and not communicating, not answering to his name. He appeared to be deaf by anybody who was just, passersby thought, okay, deaf child. And my son started ABA therapy, intensive ABA therapy from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders just after his 3rd birthday. That first year, tough. It's a bit of a blur to me because it really seriously felt like we were in trenches and constantly trying. There were a lot of tears that were cried, can I just tell you? And a lot of times that I laid awake at night and said, I don't know that I have this in me. I don't know that I am strong enough to get through this. And then, you know how sometimes you say something like that and there's another voice that says, oh yes, you are going to do it. You don't have a choice. So you better suck it up now and do it. Still some tears. Oh, the number of times that a therapist was in my house and I was going, you guys see me cry. If you watch the show at all, you see me cry on a regular basis. Can I tell you that before autism came to live at my house, I cried like once every 5 years. In fact, I was known amongst my friends as somebody who never cried. Boy, this stuff levels you. Puts you right down on your knees, doesn't it? On your kitchen floor going, okay, I need some help here. But I want you to know that help is available. And I'm not just saying that to some people. Help is available for all of you. We're here. I'm here. We bring experts in, people for you to talk to, other parents so you can share the experience. You are not alone. I know it feels like you are. I know it does. Heaven knows that I know. But I want you to know that there's so much hope. We can get so much progress with all of our children. They are not going to end up in the same place. I would never lie to you about that. But progress is progress is progress. And if your child is being self-injurious, having that stop, oh, what kind of progress would that be? If your child is 15 and still in diapers, what kind of progress would toilet training be to you? How much more could you get done if that wasn't something you had to face? What would it feel like for you? What would it feel like for your child? That can happen. It really can. I'm not lying to you. We have BCBA's, board certified behavior analysts, that come in on a regular basis and say to me, I go, really, there's no child you haven't been able to toilet train? No child whatsoever. You deal with some really tough cases, kids who have double, triple, quadruple diagnosis. Really? There's no child that you have not been able to toilet train? And they go, yep, that's right. We can toilet train them all. But we got to be consistent and we got to use these tools. So that's one of the reasons why we talk about the tools. Because I've seen it in my life, man, the turnaround for my child. He is still progressing. He's 9 now, and he's about to go into completely included typical 4th grade. And I have conversations. Can I tell you, I'm just going to admit right here, full disclosure, I have Olympic fever. And Not only that, I have given Olympic fever to my son and to my child. I am engaged in very bad parenting, especially as we're like, 2.5 weeks from the first day of school. And I tell you all the time, you got to start that routine and get them to bed earlier, or it's going to be a train wreck. I'm going to have a train wreck, and I can't stop myself. Last night, he was in bed and close to being asleep, and I made him get up. It's bad parenting. But I made him get up because I wanted him to come down and watch Michael Phelps break the record and get the 19th medal. I knew it was coming, and I knew it was going to be late, and I wanted him to experience that. I remember my dad and my mom getting me up and having me sit on the couch and watching Marc spitz. Yes, that's how old I am. And it was so interesting because I remember when the Olympics were starting and the couple of weeks before, and I was going, I can't wait. And my husband was like, oh, okay, well, it's good and it's fine, but there was no fever. And I was raised in upstate New York in a town called Saratoga, New York, where they have horse racing. So very much a horse culture and horse racing, and you don't just sit and watch the race. You get up and go, come on, and you yell as the horses. You can't. I mean, it's infectious. And so I don't watch a lot of sports, but I do watch the Olympics, and this is how I watch. And so we've been watching all week long. And last night, my husband was all but standing on top of the couch, screaming and yelling. Very exciting. So, and I hope that you guys are watching. In fact, if you have the opportunity, we always encourage you to participate in whatever way you would like. Give us ideas of things that you want covered. If you have questions, concerns, an expert that you would like to see on the show, we always welcome the conversation, the back and forth. And there are many different ways that you can participate. And one of the things that I'd love to hear from you today is, where are you watching the Olympics from and what countries are you rooting for? Because I know we're in 102 countries now, so who do you get excited about? What are you longing to see? What sport? I've been loving the table tennis. I love to watch them as they're watching their opponents, and then they watch the ball and they stare at the ball, and some of them talk to the ball. It's hilarious. I'm enjoying it so much. But I mentioned there are ways that you can write into the show. So let's talk about what some of those different ways are. If you're watching us right now on autism-live.com, you will see that at the top of your screen it says Shannon is answering. That means we're live, okay? If it says rebroadcast, that's exactly what it is. You're seeing an earlier taped version. But if it says Shannon is answering and you see that box below that says your questions, you can type in right now. It's active. You can type whatever you want. You can say, I am rooting for China, and hit enter, and it will appear here on my screen. It doesn't have to be about the Olympics. It can be about whatever you would like. You can even just say hi. I love to hear what countries you guys are watching from, though. And we can interact in that way. We have a bunch of different people who are going to be in the studio today, and I'm going to go over that in a minute. If you want to ask them a question, you certainly can using that feature. Again, that's on autism-live.com. If you're watching and it says rebroadcast, or if you're watching in any of the other different ways that you can watch us, which we'll talk about in a minute, there are still multiple ways that you can get in touch with us. You can email us, and Emily's showing you right now on the screen. There's our lovely email address. Please feel free to email us. What we will do is answer your question on the next available show, and we will send you a typewritten response, sometimes with a link to where we answered it on the show. It does take a couple of days to do that, so it's that delayed gratification, right? But you will get your question answered. And it doesn't have to be about the things that we've covered here on the show. If you have a question about something, what we can do, I love to be a conduit for you. As I say, I am not an expert, but I love to ferry your questions to other people, consult with them, and sometimes you'll even see that the email is from them, from some of the experts that we have access to. And if you're watching a guest and you see it after the fact and say, oh, I wish I could have asked, please still send the question. We will forward it on to them and get a response from them and get that back to you. So please participate. There are other ways as well, though. You can phone in. This is our phone line. If we are live, you can phone in and be patched in immediately into the studio. You can be asking me a question, ask our guests a question. If we are not live, there are other people standing by waiting to take your call and help to answer your questions or direct them in other ways. And if it's not during business hours, you can leave a message for us and we will get back to you as soon as we're back in the studio. You can also Skype in. This is something that we've been doing a lot of, even international Skyping. So no matter where you are, if you'd like to be a part of the live show, you can Skype in. And if you have camera set up on your computer, you can let us know that. And you and I can be talking side by side. It's very fun. We've got 2 Skype guests tomorrow. So Skype is a really wonderful way that you can communicate with us. You can also participate with us on Facebook. We have a brand new Facebook page, Autism Live. You can answer the question of the day there, see some of the topics we've been covering, some of the topics we're hoping to cover. You can interact with both Autism Live staff and with the world at large. I love it when you guys answer the question of the day and support each other and give each other information. It's a beautiful thing. You can also tweet with us. We really enjoy your tweets, and I personally am new to the tweet world, but I'm getting better at it because you guys are teaching me so much. So feel free to tweet with us. I mentioned that there are other ways that you can watch us. You can be watching us on blip.tv. We love that because you can pause, fast forward, rewind, search a topic, search a specific day. If you missed Holly Robinson Pete last Wednesday, or if you missed Angela Persicki talking about toilet training, you can go back and search those individual topics and take a look at just the portion that you want. We know you've got a busy day. You got to get to OT, you got to get to speech, you got a therapist at the door, I hope. Because that's the best possible thing, or you're filling out paperwork, whatever it is, we know you're busy, so it maximizes your time. By the way, you can also be watching us on our very own YouTube channel. I really like that because some of the interviews are cut down, more concise, so that it really saves time on YouTube. And you can be interacting with us on YouTube, leave a message on YouTube. We get all of those as well. We are also a free download on iTunes, so you can do sound and picture and archive them yourselves, be searching the topics, start and stop, and we are also seen on Ustream. So all of those different ways that you can be watching us, we hope that you participate in whatever way best suits you. And if there is a way that you would like to be seeing us that we have not listed, please let us know and we will get that. We're on Blip because you guys asked us to be, so which was a great suggestion, by the way. We like to start every morning with something that I fondly refer to as the jargon of the day. This is the time of day when we take one word, one phrase, one anagram, and try to demystify it. We know we have to make friends with the jargon. Oh, it's like so exhausting, right? You finally get the appointment that you want to be able to help your child. You're talking to the expert, and the expert utters a bunch of gobbledygook, and you're feeling like you can handle it, so you say, could you please explain that to me? I didn't understand that term. And then they give you a bunch more jargon, right? They do love the jargon. And there's a reason why, because it's so specific to what we're talking about. But with everything else we have to get caught up on, it really can be debilitating if we don't understand. Well, we like to do things just the way we like to teach our children, take it in very small increments. So we give you that one word, one phrase, one anagram, give you an actual definition, so you start to get used to some of the jargon terms, and then give you a somewhat watered down working definition so that you can start to access what this means right now with your individual child. So our phrase today, our anagram for the day is DTT. We talk about this all the time on the show, and the actual definition for DTT, it stands for discrete trial teaching. It's training that focuses on a single cycle of behavior-based instruction routine. Okay, what does that mean for our kids? Let's take a look at our working definition, teaching one targeted behavior at a time. I got to back up a little bit and say that when we talk about ABA, applied behavior analysis, a lot of people make the mistake of saying that ABA and DTT are the same thing, that they're one and the same, synonymous. That is not the case. I always like to say, you know, you're driving your car, you got a big car, right? And you got a steering wheel. The steering wheel is part of the car, it is not the car. You would never say, I'm taking my steering wheel and going to Palm Desert, right? Yeah, I'm driving to Palm Desert, taking the car, and the steering wheel is a part of that, and an important part. I wouldn't want to drive anywhere without my steering wheel, right? But it's not the same thing as a car. Same thing with ABA and DTT. ABA is the car. It's a big car. It's got lots of room, and it's got lots of functioning parts to it, right? And one part of it is DTT, maybe the steering wheel. Really important part, DTT is fabulous at beginning to teach something. I'm a former teacher, and when my child descended into autism, I didn't know what to do. I would try to teach him something, and I couldn't. I couldn't get there. I couldn't weed through all the different things that he had going on to make a connection. And there was a day when I literally sat there and thought, oh my goodness, is my child unteachable? Thank goodness that was not the case, and that was easily demonstrated to me with DTT. DTT is not the be-all, end-all, though. If all we ever taught was DTT, we would have a bunch of children who had a little bit of knowledge but couldn't apply it to the real world. We would never want that, right? So we start with DTT, we incorporate NET, which is natural environment training, we do precision training, we do fluency-based training, a whole lot of different things that is that whole ABA car, right? But we use DTT a lot of the time to begin to teach a new skill, because what DTT does, I always think of it as taking a bubble and removing everything else. Take that bubble and you train this skill within that bubble. You remove all the distractions and you're only teaching one little thing at a time so that the child doesn't have to get overwhelmed, and so that we can immediately get to the good part, which is when they get reinforced. So when we do the DTT, we talked the other day about the 3-term contingent with behavior, that there's something that happens before the behavior, and the consequence. What DTT does is take that and put it in a bubble and remove it from everything else. Yesterday, our word was SD. So the SD is the thing that happens, we say or do, the child does the behavior, and the consequence is some form of reinforcement. We praise them, or we give them something, or we, tickle them or ruffle their hair, something that's pleasant to them so that they want to keep doing it. DTT, very effective at teaching a new skill. From time to time, we show you video, and we'll show the A word in a little while, and you'll see some little snippets of DTT. It looks bizarre. It looks like, what has this got to do with real life? Why on earth would I want my child to do this? Sometimes you'll hear people say, oh, ABA, it just turns those kids into robots. And when you watch a DTT video, you think, oh, well, I can understand why they think that. But remember that DTT is just like step one of starting to teach something. And once the child says, wow, this isn't hard to do this little part, and then we teach another part and we put those two things together and the child starts to grow a skill, now we take it and put it in the real environment. And the child starts to learn how to learn. It's very exciting, very exciting. So DTT, a wonderful thing, but don't mistake it for the entire thing. We're not going to stop at DTT, but it's so great at beginning to teach something. It's amazing. Okay, that's our jargon of the day. Let's move on to the question of the day. We always ask you a question of the day. It's meant to get you thinking, participating. Again, you can answer this on our Facebook page, or you can tweet us, whatever you would like. Hopefully we'll have some time later on today. We have a pretty full schedule, but if not, we'll go over the answers today. Today's question tomorrow. Today's question is, what are you resentful about? Let's face it, there are things to be resentful about, right? But I think sometimes it's really beneficial to get it up, get it out, and move on. Because the resentment, while it's there and we have to acknowledge it, you got to be able to get through it to get back into action. I was mentioning this article that I was reading this morning, and the mom was saying, while the rest of my friends are thinking about middle school for their child, I'm at the ER with my son because of some of his challenging behavior, and he's hurt himself. And you'd be hard-pressed not to have some resentment. We've had guests on the show before. I love Bryce Myler. She says, that day when my son was diagnosed, and I realized, I'm not going to Little League, and I'm not going to ballet. And she didn't for a lot of years. And her son got ABA and is now in college and driving a car and having a job. It doesn't last forever if we put the time in. But still, there's some resentment, right? Because we thought we were going someplace and instead we went to Holland. right? But I think it's really beneficial for all of us to state it. What are you resentful about? And then as you guys share, you'll see you're not alone, right? We know that there's some resentment, but let's move through it. The hardest thing for me, and I still struggle with it, is that I had this idyllic picture in my head of what it was going to be like when I had a toddler, and that we were going to go to the park, and we were going to have these picnics, and we were going to sit and play. I love that song, Return to Pooh Corner, and we were going to count the bees in the hive, right? Except we didn't. We met the therapist at the door, and we didn't play with all the toys and go on for the picnics in the park that the other, and I still struggle sometimes. I see somebody with a 3-year-old and I go, I didn't get to have that. But you know what? I get to have a 9-year-old now who is the light of my life and looks me in the eye and talks to me and says, Mom, I love you. And that makes it all worth it. And I know that there are some of you out there who go, ooh, Shannon, I resent that because my 9-year-old's not looking me in the eye, and my 9-year-old still doesn't have functional communications to tell me I love you. Stick around. Stick around, because there's hope for everyone. We talked to Arthur Fleischman a couple of weeks ago, Carly Fleischman's dad, and no functional communication until she was 9 or 10. And now, my goodness, this young woman, she communicates on a level that is awe-inspiring to me. So don't give up. You stick around. There are things that we can do to help you, to help your child. Okay, we always have a topic of the day, and our topic for this entire week is ABA for beginners, because I believe that it's important to go back to basics on a regular basis. I need it, right? These tools are great, but only if we use them and use them consistently. And there are times when I forget my tools as a parent. You know, you get caught up in the moment. So really good to do a refresher course and go, oh, right. We've talked before about when you have a child that's not complying, that the first question you want to ask yourself is, how much praising have I done? I need to be reminded of that on a daily basis. I don't know about you, but when I do praise more, the compliance comes back and everything is better. Everything is better, and I need to be reminded of these things, and I know many of you have said that you need to be reminded too. So we're ABA for beginners. To that end, we got a lot of stuff going on today. We have a play tip for you. We have Evelyn Gould that's going to be with you at 10 o'clock. We're going to be talking about some really important things with Evelyn. She's a BCBA board-certified behavior analyst. At 11 o'clock, we have Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. Nancy Alspaugh Jackson will be joining me for that hour, and we have a wonderful interview that we've done with Gabriella, and her name, it's more than I can handle, but I'm going to get close to it, Teissier. Is what I'm going to say. She is a wonderful morning anchor for UniVision, and we did a great interview with her about how important it is for those of you who are Spanish speaking to get the help and support for your children. So that's going to be a really exciting interview. But to start it off, to kick it off this morning, we have a very important guest with us this morning that I'm really excited to meet in person. Marc Sirkin, who is from Autism Speaks. He is a vice president of social marketing for Autism Speaks. All that digital stuff that you see Autism Speaks do, he is very involved and the head of that. Really excited to be talking with him. He also writes some blogs for Autism Speaks that I've been dying to talk to him about. So we're going to take a short break. We're going to get Marc here in the studio. If you have questions, now is a great time to be writing in. Remember, you don't have to log in if you're watching us on autism-live.com. And it says Shannon is answering. You can ask your questions right now, but you can also, if you want to call, Skype, Facebook, tweet, bring it on. We'll be back after these messages with Marc Sirkin from Autism Speaks. Stick with us.
Well, we have developed a protocol for assessing behaviors in children with autism. And basically, the kids come out into two broad areas, and sometimes it's a mixture of the two. Some of the children we see, we would call wandering. They haven't learned the skills of knowing that you're supposed to stay close to mom or dad, walk next to them, not walk off on your own and just wander off, or stop and look at things and not notice that mom or dad has kept going and turned around the corner and are now out of sight. typically developing children have what we call stranger anxiety, and it seems to be have a biological basis, and they learn to stick very close to mom and dad, especially at a very young age. Kids with autism are much less likely to show that sort of thing, and so we see this wandering behavior more often in young children with autism than in typically developing kids. So that's one group, is what we call the wanderers. And then there's another group of kids that kind of bolt or elope, and these are children who typically do it for a reason. There's a goal. Sometimes that is when we try to get them to do tasks that they don't like doing, they run away from us. Other kids, when we're not providing attention, they run away to see if we will react to their running. And other kids will run to gain access to what we call tangible items. And sometimes that is just running to get to the playground, like typically kids would do, but doing it, more intently, oftentimes not watching, not when they cross the street, could run in front of a car. And then also we sometimes see kids bolting for tangible items that are kind of unusual. That the children with autism often have unusual interests. And so we may have a child with autism who is bolting to pick up an unusual looking rock, or to go to the elevator and press and stim on the buttons. We had one little guy that would go to the soda machine, and big, fancy colored lights behind it, and he'd go and tap on it and look at it and listen to it and engage in self-stimulatory behavior on that particular object. But that was where, when he ran away to that. And so we've developed a set of procedures for looking at the kids, starting with a descriptive assessment, where we have them walk along a prescribed route, and sometimes we bait the prescribed route with things that might tempt a child to run away to get to. Sometimes we give them demands to see if, while we're walking with them, if we're telling them to do things, tuck in your shirt, comb your hair, are they more likely to bolt to get away from those tasks we're asking them to do? And so we've developed this set of walks that help us to determine, are these children just wandering and don't know when they should stop with us or walk with us? And then we have a set of treatments that are matched to the function or the purpose of the child's elopement or wandering or bolting. The treatment that we prescribe then is a very skill acquisition based treatment to teach the child that they need to stay within arm's length of the adult they're walking with, and we have specific procedures for doing that training. If the child tends to be a bolter, then we do a functional analysis to understand why they're bolting, what they're bolting to get, what is the goal or outcome that is reinforcing the behavior, and then we develop a specific intervention to address that function or that purpose.
I would imagine, though, that the assessment that you do, those directed walks, are things that are a controlled environment and really need to be done by professionals. Is that true?
Yes, and that's where we're at right now, and we start with that. We develop the treatment. We teach the child when it's safe to go and do things, when it's safe to move away from the adult, and then we train the parents to implement the procedures. And over time, we want to get so the child's elopement is under appropriate, what we would call stimulus control. They're doing it at the right time when they have signals to tell them it's safe to move away from mom or dad, but when it's not, that they need to stay close by. For example, one of the first children that we worked with bolted whenever she saw a dog. She just loved dogs, and her training went so that gradually we would expose her to different things that she would run away for, and the dog was the kind of final test case where she would have to walk about a quarter of a mile, walk right by a dog, go back to her starting point, and then we would say to the signal, now it's safe to go and see the dog. And we arranged so that that would occur in a safe location, inside a fence, and make sure it's a safe dog to be around. But to teach them that, yes, sometimes it's okay to run and go see a dog, and sometimes it's not, and here's when it is appropriate, and here's when it's not appropriate, and teach those skills, and then teach the parents to be able to implement that protocol.
We hear a lot from parents who give up. They feel like they're never going to be able to stop a child from eloping, and we always like to give them with hope. What kind of success do you have?
Sure. We recently pulled together the data from about a dozen cases, and the average reduction in elopement was about 95%. In all cases, we were able to reduce elopement by at least 85%. In the vast majority of cases, we can greatly reduce this. In some cases, reduce it to zero, but in the most cases, reduce it to a great deal and make it much more manageable for parents.
Welcome back to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod. We're webcasting to you live from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders headquarters in Tarzana, California. And our special guest today, as promised, Marc Sirkin. Thank you so much for being here. He is from, well, it's thrilled to have you here. He's from Autism Speaks, and you are the VP of Social Marketing. So all that digital stuff that we see all the time, you are the person who is driving that train.
I am. My team is actually doing all the hard work. And I get to come on the show and talk about it. But yeah, we have a small team of amazing people who are dedicated and doing just great digital work. So it's been really exciting.
Doing great digital work. We vastly appreciate it. But let's talk a little bit about Autism Speaks to start, because this is to those of us in the autism community, this is a large organization, and one of the largest. And I think a lot of times there's misconceptions about what Autism Speaks is, what they do. So tell us what the mission of Autism Speaks is.
Sure. So, in simple terms, the mission is ultimately to find what causes autism, and then to help people deal with it. And I think, I've been in Autism Speaks 3 years. It's been an interesting ride. I don't come to the autism world with a child on the spectrum. I'm not on the spectrum. I didn't have any close friends or anybody who I really knew. And like a lot of people who get introduced to the community, it's a little surprising at how controversial and divisive it can be at times. I'm still surprised, to be honest with you. But Autism Speaks, when you look back at when it was founded, 7 years ago, the story, of course, is that Susanna Bob Wright's grandson is a severely affected child with autism, and they really, looked around the world and said, "There's nobody doing anything about this, and we need to do something about it at a scale that hadn't been done." I don't mean to say there weren't autism organizations; there were a lot, but nobody had figured out how to scale it up.
Right, exactly.
And so, the history is the history, right? Cure Autism Now and NAR and all the mergers and all those things, and we find ourselves 7 years later. And the way I describe, again, at a simple level, the Autism Speaks mission is we have 4 pillars. We talk about these things all the time, right? There's research and really looking at all of the elements of science behind autism, the genetics and the the etiology, all the stuff that goes behind that. The family services component, which is growing, probably not growing fast enough, truthfully, but it's growing. And today, that's primarily digitally delivered right to our website and content, the 100-day kit and those kinds of things. But as we grow our platform and we expand with chapters and more walks, right, we can start to deliver that sort of content locally. So family services is going to continue to be a really important and big part of our mission. Advocacy ultimately is, it turns out to be really important, because without insurance, you really can't understate it.
Exactly.
How important it's been. So we've managed to get 31 states to do insurance reform, and now, of course, we're fighting with those 31 states to keep the insurance reform. And we work with the federal government through a consortium and partnerships across not just the autism spectrum, but the disability spectrum to get this work done. This billions of dollars done, and then ultimately the awareness work that we've done through the Ad Council and through our own marketing efforts, has, I think, taken autism, say, from 10 years ago to where we are today. It's on everyone's lips. We're all talking about it now. We can talk later. We can debate about how we're talking about it. But the truth is that I'm proud to say that Autism Speaks put autism on the map. Now we got to continue to evolve that. And the way I talk about our mission ultimately is in the grand scheme, in the grand arc of the story of autism in our society. We're still at the very beginning. And if you look at other disorders and diseases, whether it be civil rights movement or, say, breast cancer, these things all had an arc. Some of them took 60 or 100 years. The women's rights issues took more than 100 years, right? So I think when you start to put things in that perspective, it becomes a much more subtle and interesting story. And I find it to be not just intellectually stimulating, but also something that keeps me going every day in terms of coming to work and trying to do what we do to help the community.
Well, I have to say, I really appreciate what you guys are doing. And what was just shocking to me, what you just said when you said 7 years. Because I don't think I've ever really put it together before that's how long ago my son was diagnosed. So I think it was probably on like my 30th day that I heard Autism Speaks. Sure. And I guess I didn't realize that it hadn't been around a whole lot of time before that. Right. In fact, I remember the first time I heard Autism Speaks mentioned, it was on Donald Trump's show.
Sure. The Apprentice, the Celebrity Apprentice, right?
Celebrity Apprentice, and they were doing a fundraiser, and a woman was talking. My son hadn't been diagnosed; he was about to be diagnosed, and she was saying, some of these parents don't know if their child is ever going to say "I love you." Right. And I remember,
which, by the way, is a really
so. I mean,
that's a tough one to sort of just understand and say as a parent. I get that. It's hard.
And we were at that moment where he was losing language, and I felt that squeeze, and I thought, okay, I think it's time we need to. I don't know that much about this autism thing, but maybe we need to ask some questions. Sure. It was a pivotal moment for me. But I think all my this entire experience, I've been thinking that Autism Speaks was around a lot longer.
A lot of people do.
So that's very interesting to me. But in 7 years, you guys have accomplished a lot.
I think so.
Of course, there's much more to be done.
Endless.
And we all get that. But where we have gone in insurance reform alone, if we were to only talk about that, and we talk all the time, autismvotes.org.
Correct.
How important it is that people stay in tune with what's happening in their state and in other people's states and support. It's life-changing at this point.
It is, and just not to shill Autism Votes. We're actually rebuilding the website. I know the team's working on that now, but we've got you can text I think it's AVOTES to 30644 and get on. We'll actually figure out where you are in the country.
Wonderful.
And so when we activate locally, we can let you know and engage that way through email and social media and all those kinds of things. But yeah, I mean, that movement, that Autism Votes movement has been probably one of the most critical things we've done. And a lot of people don't even know that we're behind it. And this is not about getting credit. This is about actually getting insurance reform.
Exactly.
So it's just it's interesting you bring that up because I think that is one of those important things that
life-changing.
Yeah.
And it's not there yet. I mean, we have many more states to go, but the fact that we can say to some families when they call in, what do I do? And my first question has to be, where are you in the world? Right? I hate that part of it, but what's lovely is that for some people I can say, well, in some respects you just won the autism lottery. Right. You have access to insurance today. Yeah. And that you can get ABA and a lot of it without having to pay a whole lot out.
Yeah.
Important. But also, and you mentioned very briefly the 100-day kit.
Sure.
And I don't think that gets talked about enough, that if you're newly diagnosed and you go to autismspeaks.org and you have a whole tab for newly diagnosed and you give away free kits for the first 100 days.
We do. We have a list of kits, including not just the 100-day kit, but things like the high-functioning Asperger's kit, a dental kit, a school community kit. And one of the things that my team is working on, which I think is exciting, and we took the 100-day kit and we took the HFA kit. We put them in a partnership with Barnes & Noble. If you have a Nook or the Nook app, you can download from Barnes & Noble. You also, if you go to our website, can download it in any ebook format. So if you have an iPad, you can download the EPUB file or whatever it is and put it right in. So we're really now focusing on how we disseminate this content, partnerships, distribution through mobile, all of that stuff to put this content in people's hands, like you guys do with Autism Live, which is great.
Well, that's wonderful, because you used to be, you had to wait for it to come in the mail, but now you can get it in instant gratification. Love that.
Exactly.
All right, well, we should take a little short break, but when we come back, I want to talk to you about some of the blogs that you've written recently. I want to talk about hacking autism and about inclusion in technology, because you wrote a really spectacular blog about that. So we're going to take a short break and come back with Marc Sirkin from Autism Speaks. Stick with us.
A boy born in Joplin, Missouri was fascinated by anything with wheels and a motor. The odds of him going on to fascinate millions with his talent? 1 in 260,000. The odds of this born racer having 157 career top 10 finishes in NASCAR? 1 in 125 billion. The odds of him winning both the Daytona 500 and the Brickyard 400 in the same year? 1 in 195 million. The odds of a child being diagnosed with autism? 1 in 88. I'm NASCAR driver Jamie McMurray, and my niece has autism. Learn more at autismspeaks.org/signs.
Welcome back to Autism Live. Our special guest this morning is Marc Sirkin from Autism Speaks. He is the VP of Social Marketing, so all that digital stuff, all that digital content that we see, and there's a great deal of it. You're doing an awesome job.
Yes, thank you.
That's all coming from your office.
Mostly.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I wanted to talk to you a little bit about some of the blogs that you've been writing. It seems to me that you are a technology guy. Would that be a fair assessment?
I think so.
Okay.
You could call me a geek if you like.
I didn't want to go there.
Yeah,
I didn't want to. But one of the first blog that you wrote that really got my attention was one about inclusion and technology. You went to visit a school. Tell us a little bit about where you went.
So, in partnership with HP last October, we did an event called Hacking Autism, which was a sort of a corporate hackathon to try to build some applications for mobile devices for autism. And I met these amazing people at the Hope Technology School in Palo Alto. And it turns out that that school is really built on these like fascinating models of inclusion. And I'd never seen anything like this before. I mean, again, I don't have a kid on the spectrum, and so I'm not in this world on a daily basis. So the partner, so through the Hacking Autism, there's a documentary called I Want to Say, which I, by the way, need to get you a copy of it.
Yeah, you do.
Goodby Silverstein and Partners produced a film that started out as kind of a way to show the world what HP was working on.
Okay.
But it turns out that they just decided it was such a powerful story, they just kind of removed HP and just told the story. So it's this amazing story of these 5 kids, many of those kids who attend the Hope Technology School.
All right.
So long story short, I ended up in San Francisco for the premiere of the film at LucasArts, which, by the way, I mean, oh my God, I have pictures of me with Darth Vader. It's great. But,
okay, officially you are a geek now.
Exactly.
That's now
I was going to get there one way or another.
Okay.
So anyway, so the next day I had asked if I could visit the school, and I went down there with a guy from Stanford University. We got a tour and talked to the teachers and the executive director Gail and her husband Russ, and his boy Jordan is actually in the film using an AAC device to communicate. In fact, he's published in Chicken Soup for the Soul or something. Like, you know, it's just this amazing. So I heard you talking about Carly.
Yes.
It's like, you know, unbelievable story. So I find myself at this school, and I really was moved. I have 2 neurotypical children, 2 daughters, and I just was thinking to myself. I mean, literally the first question I asked was, why would parents with typical kids want to send their children to this school? And the answers were amazing, and the enrichment that comes from that, and the thinking behind inclusion just kind of blew me away. And that is where that blog post came from, that experience that day that I had, and I really just found it to be just very enlightened.
And you know, it's interesting, and people should read the blog. And where can they find the blog?
It's on it's on autismspeaks.org, and if you can't find it, you can tweet us, and we can send you the link.
Okay.
We moved blogs from WordPress to another site, so it may have gotten lost in translation, but it's somewhere on our site. Okay.
And it's a really incredible blog about how moving it was. But you mentioned that they have some models there that they work on and some basic premises that they work on about the very idea that not only is it going to be beneficial to the kids who are being included, but for the neurotypical peers that are there. And what kinds of things did you see there that you said as a parent you were thinking, why would anybody want to do this? What did you see that was so inspiring?
You know, I saw and was told about things like project work, sitting at a computer together and working on an iPad together. And the idea of that, you know, there's a charitable aspect of that, you know, you sort of like, you know, I can work at a soup kitchen, or I can, and that's all very good. There's nothing wrong with that. But the idea of collaborating, you know, neurotypical and typical kids, or kids with autism together in an environment where learning is the core of it.
Yeah.
I think is fascinating. I was truly moved and blown away by what those people are trying to do at the school. They told me all sorts of stories about how some of the kids who had graduated had gone on to, you know, lead programs at high schools for inclusion and create other opportunities. Just, I mean, and again, I think it's easy to overlook the power of what they're doing, and sort of dismiss it as, you know, maybe a one-off or something that not a lot. But I just found it to be, like I said, moving. It was important.
And because I know that around the world people are talking about inclusion, and people are on both sides of the argument, saying, and in the community and not in the community, saying inclusion, not inclusion. But when it works well, it is, I think, amazing.
Well, there's a huge amount of research around diversity. So if you put inclusion away for a minute and you just look at diversity, and you look at the performance of teams who have diverse members, and then you bring inclusion back in and you say, well, if you've got a person on the spectrum or with some disorder or disability or disease, it doesn't matter, and they have capability, and you put them on a team, that is diversity.
Right.
And I don't know that I'm right about that, but I feel like I am. I feel like that's the kind of the same story. And I think
I agree.
You know, at Autism Speaks, we have a lot of different people who work. We have people, you know, like me who work there for different reasons, not because I have a personal connection, but we have lots of parents and lots of people on the spectrum who work with us in different capacities. And I always find it to be interesting to get those perspectives.
Yeah.
In fact, we have a girl, a woman. Sorry, I shouldn't say girl. A woman on our team who her brother has autism, and she is our so when you see everything on digital, and so Allie's out there, I know she's watching.
Okay.
She does the Facebook and the Twitter and all that stuff.
Wonderful.
Her brother, I mean, I've learned so much from just sitting and listening to her talk about her family and her brother and the relatives and sort of how the whole family structure works. That you really start to go, there's really something to this, and you want that perspective.
Yeah.
You need that perspective.
Well, and I think likewise, I think it's important to get your perspective, because I live so much, you know, please, I have lots of friends who don't have children on the spectrum, but I live a lot in this world and look at people, and I don't know anymore how somebody who doesn't have a child with autism thinks. And so for you to say, I went there and wondered, why would somebody want to send their neurotypical child here? I need to hear that as a parent, because that's part of what I have to address with my son. So I think it's important that we all, you know, you talk about diversity. I need your diversity. And I think it is important for people who don't have children on the spectrum to be on our teams as well.
Agree.
So I appreciate your input, and you do have a different place that you're coming from that I think is valid to our community. I hope so too. And I hope that people look at it that way. But you mentioned that hacking autism. Let's talk a little bit about that, because this is fascinating to me. Who came up with this idea?
So the guy's name, his name is Phil McKinney, and he was the HP CIO in the Consumer Products Group. In December, he left HP, and we had a discussion, and Autism Speaks ended up owning Hacking Autism. So I actually am the owner of the thing, whatever it is, and whatever we turn it into, which is debatable and interesting. And so
and exciting, I think.
Very, very exciting and very interesting. And I've spent, you know, gosh, probably the last 4 or 5 months thinking about what is it, what could it be, and I've come up with a couple of different ideas and some different directions that I want to take it. You know, at a very simple level, it's a hackathon program. So it's a way for developers to come together with the autism community and build stuff, whatever that stuff is. Could be mobile apps, could be web applications. I don't know, I don't care. But what I've done is I've harnessed experts in the community to tell me what problems need to be solved.
Right.
And now I'm trying to figure out how to connect the development world to those problems.
So it's like a challenge. You know, here's this thing that's going on in our real lives. What could you invent technology-wise that could make this better or fix it?
Correct.
Which I think is exciting. What a great question to be asking.
It's one of those things where you go, that's the right question. Now where's the answer?
Right. Well, and you're starting to get people thinking of it, which that's got to be the right direction. And has anything come from it that really has made a substantive difference yet, or is it going to take a little more time?
I don't think so. I think it's going to take time, and I think part of what I'm starting to really realize is it's not about apps. Right? There's lots of apps, and we could talk about what good apps, bad apps, apps that work, apps that don't work. What it's really about is understanding, you know, the person on the spectrum, where they are, what they need, and how can technology help them. So you look at this, you know, Google's got this Google Glass thing, right? I don't know if you've heard about this, but it's like glasses that are connected to the internet all the time.
Oh.
And you think about the impact of that if that was real and it worked the way they say it'll work. And maybe it will, maybe it won't. But if you're a person with autism and you have trouble with, let's say, facial recognition, or you have trouble in social situations, but you're good on, let's say, just as an example, you have lots of people you know on Facebook and Twitter. You put these glasses on and you walk into a crowded room, and the glasses could tell you, well, that's Joe from Facebook. Right? There's a doorway to social success through that. Just one simple example. So what I've really started to think about is what I call the applied technology. So how can we take the technologies that exist, like filmmaking, like art, 3D modeling, computer programming, game design, you name it, and how can we build partnerships through Hacking Autism with companies that do those kinds of things to provide parents and people on the spectrum an opportunity to learn about those things, because not everybody knows. You know, just as an example, there's a company in Dallas called Nonpareil. I'll give them a shout out. They are a mind-blowing organization. They're a nonprofit organization that hires adults on the spectrum to create video games that they sell for profit. Lovely. I mean, gotta love that. You gotta love that, right? And they have all these amazing partnerships. They do all this amazing work, and they've adapted game development and design principles from a school that they sort of slowed down appropriately to get these autistics into the program, and it is really, I find it to be one of those things like, you go, wow, that's amazing. If they can do that, what else can we do with technology?
Right. Absolutely. It is kind of endless. And I think once you ask the right question, a lot of great minds can then say, all right, what can we do about this? You open up the discussion. It's a fascinating thing. So is there a time period that the hackathon happens? Is it ongoing?
It's ongoing. And what I've done is there are companies that are doing their own internal hacks. There's a company in Chicago. I help them spec out and design an application that they're building. It's like an emotion recognition design with a game engine behind it. Really cool. And so they're doing that as an employee morale building effort. They're a software company and they wanted to find something to do. So they've got a hackathon going on, kind of ongoing. It's a 3-4 month project.
Nice.
I'm also working, and I won't say the name of it, but there's an event in New York coming up in the fall that I would like to do a hack.
Okay.
I'm working with a very well-known university that has a robotics platform that's open source, and we're talking about doing a hackathon at this event in New York in the fall to bring some specific developers together. So I'm being very opportunistic about it right now because I don't want to overcommit in any one direction, but I also want to be able to tell stories about, for example, the work that University of Utah is doing with Google SketchUp, formerly Google SketchUp. They sold the software, but 3D modeling. They created a program called Project Spectrum that probably parents don't necessarily know about, but you can Google Project Spectrum, and you can introduce your child to 3D modeling. Free software. Right, and they may like it, they may not. That's not the issue, but the exposure.
My son would love that.
So you should have him check that out.
Yeah.
And there's a whole curriculum and a whole program. And so I see this stuff happening, and I think what I love about working at Autism Speaks is we have a big voice. So I can tell people about it. I can come on the show, or we can put it on our website. And so I think exposing people to all those things is becoming part of what Hacking Autism is as well.
Well, Marc, I just want to crawl inside your head, and because you know all these things that are very exciting to me. I just want to pick and choose and go, all right, we would like to pull that file out. Very exciting. All right, we're going to take another short break. We're going to come back for another segment with Marc and talk about, you're a big organization, so sometimes you take some hits.
Sure.
They're big in the controversy. We'll talk a little bit about that, so stick with us. More with Marc Sirkin from Autism Speaks after these messages.
My name's Matthias and I'm 8 years old. My brother's Christian and he's 10 and he has autism. What I like about Christian is his sense of humor. He makes me laugh a lot. The most fun I've been with Christian is when we go into the ocean and we play. When Christian and I are in the ocean, you can't really tell Christian has autism. Christian would like to swim across the ocean. It's hard for him to talk, and when it does, it's like it just comes out with not right. He has the words locked inside of him. Sometimes people stare and it's a little uncomfortable. At night, there's always a loud sound of Christian crying in the other room. It's one of the times that's hard to have a brother with autism. I would like the world to actually find something that could help Christian with his autism.
Visit autismspeaks.org.
Welcome back to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod. I'm here with Marc Sirkin from Autism Speaks. You're the VP of social marketing, all that digital great stuff that you guys are doing. It's absolutely wonderful. And tell us a couple of places where people can be looking. Your YouTube channel, I have great envy. It's wonderful.
Do you?
I do.
Good.
It's fabulous. Yes. It's absolutely fabulous.
Awesome.
So they can go and find your YouTube channel.
Sure.
And where else can they be looking to see some of the digital stuff that you guys are doing?
the main place is autismspeaks.org, obviously, and there's links to our Facebook page and our Twitter and our YouTube and LinkedIn. We're on LinkedIn now, so we can do that. And there's actually mobile apps now. We just released mobile apps. So there's an Android app and an iOS app, not iPad, unfortunately, yet. But it has all of our news feeds. Our YouTube content is in there, and so just lots of ways to stay in touch with us. Sign up on email. We make it easy to stay in touch with us.
Okay,
if that's what you want to do.
Well, absolutely. And I also mentioned autismvotes.org.
Yep.
You guys, I tell you to go there all the time and check and see where you're at in terms of autism insurance reform.
Absolutely.
But I mentioned before the break that you guys are a big organization in the world of autism, one of the biggest, and you are the center of a lot of discussion, a lot of it great, a lot of parents who appreciate and follow you guys closely, and you get some criticism from time to time.
We do. I've noticed. and it turns out most of it's on social media.
Yes. How does that work? Do you get a lot of heat at work for that?
No, I wouldn't say heat. I mean, we talk a lot about how and when to respond to things.
Yeah.
So yeah.
But it's, and especially lately, you guys have been the subject of a lot of controversy.
It goes in waves.
Yes, it does. And but you know, how do you guys deal with that in terms of morale? You know, how much of it do you listen to, and do you have any response to it?
Well, you know, I think it does affect morale, and I think that people come to the organization and work for us for all sorts of different reasons.
Yeah.
And so, you know, so it can be tough at times. I mean, I would say, in our defense, some of it is unwarranted, and I would say, to our detriment, that some of it's self-inflicted.
Okay.
You know, I think that, you know, one of the interesting things, and I talk about this a lot. Now I'm about to talk about it on the air, so that'll be the first time.
Okay.
But one of the things I talk about a lot is what I consider a fairly significant fault line within the autism community, which is the distinction of it being a medical issue and a civil rights issue.
Yeah.
And it's a tough one.
It is
right?
tough.
I mean, you know, I completely sympathize and empathize and understand the self-advocate community. It makes complete sense to me. I get it. But I also understand that parents have a right to grieve, and parents have a right to want a better life for their kids. It's a complicated issue.
Yeah, it
you
is.
know, it's just, and I don't mean that to sound like an excuse, like, oh,
No.
I don't think that gets anybody off the hook. But I do think, I talked about earlier, the kind of arc of Autism Speaks, and I think autism has an arc as well. And I would argue that we're kind of in the middle of that arc.
Yeah,
you know, I think
agree.
that, and I always like to talk about, you know, I'm old enough to remember, I'm not that old, but I'm old enough to remember, you know, the gay rights movement 15 or 20 years ago.
Yeah.
You know, Glee is a pretty amazing show.
Yeah.
And you can like it or not, but it's national dialogue, it's global dialogue.
Yeah.
And I don't think autism's quite there yet, but
Right.
we're close. And I do believe that. And I think it's going to be, to everyone's benefit, the faster we can kind of turn that wheel and get that to where it needs to be. And I do think that's where a lot of the controversy, unfortunately, comes from.
Yeah. I said to somebody the other day, they were talking about, because we've had multiple controversies with people saying things recently, 50 Cent, Joe Scarborough, and somebody who doesn't have a child on the spectrum said, man, you autism parents, boy, you get hepped up, you get angry.
Right.
And I said, you know, I want you to understand that we have so much, our question of the day today is, what are you resentful about, right?
Great question.
And we have so much to grieve. We have so much to be resentful about, so much anger that we can't channel enough in different places that are productive. And so if you give us something to get angry about, boy, we hone in on that like crazy, don't we? So, and I feel it sometimes here, you know, that we always ask for criticism here, and sometimes we get it. And I always try to remember, you know, that it's coming from a place of the people who have a lot on their plate, a lot on their plate, and this is an emotional issue.
It is.
And it's a huge, big spectrum, and to be able to talk to all people at all times, I just don't know that it's possible.
It is, and there is no, you know, there's no silver bullet, and there's no easy answer to any of these things. But yeah, I mean, 50 Cent and Joe Scarborough both said things that they shouldn't have said.
Yeah.
And, you know, whether they apologize or not is not really the issue, I don't think. And this kind of drove our response, to give you an insight into that controversy. I mean, I think that ultimately we need to continue to drive the dialogue at high levels. And so arguing with 50 Cent over whether or not he should say things like that, I mean, you know, there is an argument to be made that we should yell and scream and stamp our feet. There's an also argument to be made that there's a bigger picture and that we need to keep working at that level.
Well, you know, my response was that he should write a series of checks.
Oh, we agree.
And I encouraged him to give one to Autism Speaks and with some other wonderful organizations that are out there, to the Holly Rod Foundation, to the Art of Autism, to the Special Needs Network, and to Autism Care and Treatment Today. If you're watching, Mr. Cent.
Yes. Thank you. He's not. Unfortunately, he's not. And again, that is part of the issue.
Yes. Yes. And we asked people, who would you like to see, if he were going to write a check, who would you like for him to write a check to? And many people wrote it in and said, as much as I would like for him to write a check, I would like for him to have to go work, do community service hours for some of those organizations so that he could see firsthand. I kind of liked that idea too. But I like the check too.
Checks are good.
Because how much difference can $1 million make to even an organization such as yourself?
A lot. Quite a lot.
How many lives can it impact?
I agree.
An amazing amount. Well, Marc, I want to thank you for being here and for writing the things that you're writing about, and for giving us lots of content and information that we're excited to keep watching at Autism Speaks.
It's my pleasure. It's a great show.
And let us know anytime you have something that we can be talking about because you know a lot. I'm fascinated.
Thank you.
We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we're going to be joined by Evelyn Gould, BCBA, and answering some of your questions that you guys have been writing in. So keep the questions coming. Evelyn will be back with us after these messages.
My name is Crystal Shepard,
I'm Pete.
and our son Logan was diagnosed in February of 2003. Wow, it seems like a long time ago. We were fortunate enough to find CARD when he was 20 months old. My husband called and said, "You need to go to this place. I've researched it. You need to go right now." So I went and knocked on the door, and we found Doreen.
Doreen, we sat down, and I'll never forget what she said. She goes, "Well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to get him caught up and make sure he never falls behind again." I was like, that's it, you know? And
He's a very fun, popular kid. He
Rock
never
star.
Rock star. He's a drummer, quite an accomplished drummer. He never stops talking. He's got a funny story and a smile for everybody that he meets. And it's pretty amazing. He's a completely different kid. Recovery is possible if you take the right steps, if you're willing to put in all the hard work. And 7.5 years, yeah, it's a lot of work. It's worth every little bit, and CARD's been there with us every step of the way.
My name's Monica,
And I'm Marc.
and we have a son, Riley, and he is autistic.
Riley was almost completely non-communicative at the time that he was diagnosed. Really no language, no interest in speaking. And one of the big changes is he independently states a lot of things now.
I need to walk.
You need to walk? Make him walk. Asks for things that he wants, responds appropriately.
Hi, Doggy Dory.
Oh, so nice. We've tried other things before ABA, but the most beneficial thing has been ABA services, and I'd be the first person to tell any newly diagnosed family that you have to contact an ABA provider, and if you're lucky enough to have CARD, you're very blessed.
We are extremely grateful for the amazing job CARD has done in helping our daughter. Our daughter today, just in 4 months, I think is a totally different child than when she started with CARD. I kind of see it as, it seems like her brain in a way was asleep, and now that we've gotten so many services, we've seen her wake up.
Did you have some gases?
And now she engages with everybody. It's wonderful. She likes to play, and she's very affectionate, and she expresses that now. Her language has gotten a lot better just in the last 4 months. It's amazing.
Since starting with CARD, Amaya's made a ton of progress, and we couldn't be more grateful that she has become potty trained, started using utensils individually. She is learning how to navigate public, is holding our hands, and just wanting to be around people more. So we're so grateful for everything that you guys have done.
Hi, Dr. Grandpa Shay. Congratulations on your 20-year anniversary of CARD. I love all my CARD teachers. They are the best. And now I'd like to play you a Beatles song. It's called Cross the Universe.
I first saw Dr. Grandpa Shay speak at a biomedical conference somewhere, and I was just so impressed with her. She stood up there and she talked with such confidence about recovery and what she could do for these children, and she had a whole curriculum, and I was just so impressed. But she said things like, teach them help them to develop these other skills that they have. And I thought that was so neat hearing that from her, that it would be good for them socially and help them to bridge with others. And so over the years, that's actually something my son has developed. You know, if he hadn't had speech therapy or OT over the years, he probably would be just about, you know, pretty much the same child still, not so different. But if he hadn't had CARD, I mean, he would be a completely different child. This program has unlocked the door for him to have a bright future.
Bye. Thanks for watching.
My name is Rachel Pokorski, and I have a son, Kyle Pokorski, who's 7 years old now.
Cool art by Kyle.
Around 15 months, we noticed that he had lost some speech, that he was headbanging, he had tantrums, and we were lucky. We waited and we got in with CARD, and it started working right away.
I have another exciting feature. If you put more marbles in, they alternate.
He's in a second grade class. He's at the top of his class. He reads over 100 words a minute. He's reading at 5th grade level. He loves space and astronomy, and he'll tell you, you know, why does Venus rotate backwards? Yeah, why don't the marbles go up? Why do they go down?
Because gravity.
And he's always wanting to know more.
Why you're the one that takes the microphone?
He loves to surf.
First, I didn't want to surf, but now I love to surf.
He loves to horseback ride.
I won a trophy.
You have made a difference in his life.
CARD helped me to save.
I owe everything to you. Now, who built this?
I did.
And are you a good builder?
Yes!
Welcome back to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod, and I'm here right now with the fabulous Evelyn Gould. She's a BCBA, a board-certified behavior analyst. I know you guys look forward to when she's here on Wednesdays at 10 o'clock, and we talk about different topics, but we also answer questions, and you guys started writing in with some questions. I want to remind everybody that we never want to be in a position where it appears that we are giving child-specific information, because we can't do that. We don't know your child, and it takes a great deal of fact-finding and data-taking to understand what's a proper intervention for a child. So we're going to speak in terms of generalities and make some suggestions about getting more help and more support, but nothing, should ever be misconstrued as child-specific, because that would be a disservice to your child.
And that's the beauty of behavior analysis, and why it's so effective is the fact that we individualize everything to the child.
Yes.
And we don't slap on an intervention to a behavior.
Right.
It has to be matched to whatever the function of the behavior is, why the child's doing it, all the contextual factors, the environmental factors that are going on, the child's-specific family circumstances, like everything is taken into consideration, and then an intervention should be individualized.
Yes.
And if you ever are, I think if you're ever working with a clinician or something and you feel like that's not happening, then it's an alarm bell.
Yeah, you guys know, I'm preaching to the choir here. You guys know, you go to have a meeting about your child at school, and somebody comes in who's never seen your child, and I hope that's not happening to you, but it does happen to people. Somebody comes in and goes, oh, well, for kids with autism, this is the intervention that we do, and you want to just go, excuse me, but this is not a one-size-fits-all. I have an individual child here. Could you look at my child, not your little diagnosis book here?
Yeah.
Right? And so that we can't, because we don't know your child.
I actually worked with a client in Belfast who was telling me that she had a teenager actually that we toilet trained, but she said that her frustration was she went to her GP with different problems, and he would just open a drawer and flick through to his leaflets and then pull out a sheet on whatever it was, and then hand it to her and be like, there you go.
Yeah. Thanks so much. Not helpful. But there are some things, and we always talk about tools that we can give you and information that we can give you that can help you to get further in your discussion. Okay, so here's a tough question. I'm going to put it up here on the screen so that you guys can all see it. And by the way, if you're watching us on Autism-Live and it says Shannon is answering, that question box is active. You can be asking questions right now. That's how people are getting through to us on autism-live.com. If you're watching and it says rebroadcast, you can send an email, you can phone in. We'll go over all those things in just a minute. But the first question here is, my son has PDD-NOS, which is pervasive development disorder not otherwise specified. That's a mouthful, right? But we learned that on this journey, right? My son has PDD-NOS. He had an MRI, and he came back normal. How can he have PDD if his brain is showing normal? This is not the first time that I've heard a parent address this, but there is a simple explanation.
The way that PDD, NOS, and autism or Asperger's or any of these developmental disabilities are diagnosed is actually not based on your brain chemistry or neurology.
Or what it even looks like.
Exactly. It's based purely on your external behaviours, so whatever the behaviours that you're engaging in or the skills that you're lacking in. And I'm guessing the reason that is basically because we haven't managed to pin down the biological factors that we could use, or the markers, genetic markers and so on, that we can use to diagnose a child with a developmental delay.
Yeah.
And that's kind of your answer. The reason that your child has that diagnosis is based on their behavior and their skill deficits.
Not the size, shape, or look of their brain in any way, shape, or form. Now, it is confusing because a lot of research is being done on MRIs looking for that connection. But definitively, that connection has not been made yet.
No, and it's possible there may be some kids with the diagnosis who maybe do have some differences in their brains, but it's not reliable. It's not at all a reliable way to diagnose a child at all.
So frustrating for you, but realize that PDD-NOS, same thing with autism and Asperger's, are all diagnosed on behaviors. By the way, last Friday at the 11 o'clock hour, we had Dr. Jonathan Tarbox in the studio, and he went over very extensively the criteria for an autism diagnosis. If you want to go back and watch that episode, you can find it on Blip TV. It was last Friday, which I believe, is that the 25th, Emily? We'll find out what that date was, what Friday's date was. But you can watch that on Blip TV. You can watch that on YouTube to see exactly, and he talks about, here is the classic autism diagnosis, and if you don't meet this, then you could get the PDD-NOS, and that might, it was the 27th, Emily is telling me. So Friday the 27th, you can search Dr. Jonathan Tarbox. It was in the 11 o'clock hour, and we went over that diagnostic criteria, and that should explain why your child is getting that PDD-NOS, which isn't going to show up on the MRI. But great question. Thank you for writing that in. Another person who writes in, how do we get our 3-year-old to eat more than baby food? He is autistic. We have tried everything. I know in a few minutes we're going to show, we interviewed Kathy Piazza up at ABAI, and we're going to show that interview in just a few minutes. But there are some things that we can be doing, and there are a couple of questions about food issues here. But
this is actually quite a common issue that we come across with children with autism. I've certainly worked with kids who won't eat more than baby food, and they won't eat anything that's got any kind of texture to it.
Yeah,
that's very common. And so what we do is we bring in, it's very, very hard to do it yourself.
Right. This is one of those areas where you want to get some expert help.
Yeah, and part of the reason that is for parents is food is the most emotional issue.
For all of us.
Well, yes. But if you have a child and who's not eating, it's extremely emotive. It's very, very hard to deal with because food is really essential to your well-being, and I just feel like it's the hardest thing for parents to do by themselves.
Well, and we associate food with love, don't we? Is there anybody who doesn't?
And if your child isn't eating, then it's reflection on you as a parent, and you're neglecting your child at the most basic level. I've heard parents say that.
Right. There's fear. There's fear. I mean, it's life-sustaining. I mean, there's the nutritional aspect of it. There's the life-sustaining aspect. There's the nurturing aspect of it. It's power-packed.
And so I tend to see like the biggest emotional battles between like parents struggling to get their children to eat and so on. It's really, really hard. So you really, really do need to get someone to help you and support you, at least initially to support you, because when what you're going to try and do is we've talked about shaping on the program, and it's about shaping and reinforcement, and also looking at function of any behaviors that are surrounding the eating. So if your child's trying to escape, like figuring out how you can gradually go from, you're not going to suddenly jump from baby food to eating a burger.
It's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen without, you know, force feeding your child, which we don't recommend at all, because you're just traumatizing the child, traumatizing the parent. It's not going to be effective. So what we want to do is generally shape the behavior, and gradually change from like a liquidy food up to the more textured food and so on. And there's various different techniques that are very well researched and well supported and very effective if they're done consistently. I think consistency is the key, and reinforcement and having support so that you're able to follow through with the procedures, because you will see distressing behaviors from your child, no matter how slowly you're gradually doing things, especially at the start. You know, so it's really important to get support from someone. But there is hope, and there's a lot of research on feeding out there, and that shows that kids who are very dramatically restricting their diet and so on and that can be changed actually pretty quickly.
Relatively quickly. You know, as the parent, it feels like it's going the speed of molasses going uphill in January, but in actuality, then you arrive there and you look back and go, wow, how different our lives are.
If you look at how long the problem's been going on in the bigger picture versus how long it takes to kind of move towards something better. The problems occur whenever the parents don't have enough support, or you're not able to have someone to support you through it, because it is so hard to do yourself.
It's hard. So it's just two really important points that I want to make that you were talking about. So important, work with someone, work with a professional. When it comes to food and sustenance of life, really not something you want to try to do on your own. And also when you're working with a professional, somebody who's an expert, you're probably going to go through, I would recommend that you go through a phase beforehand, especially something like this, where you're making sure that there's no medical issue first, right? Because there are some kids who do have issues with swallowing and so on and so forth, and you want to rule that out before you start an intervention.
Any clinician who is experienced will come and make sure that there's none of those physical issues going on before they put into, because that should be part of the assessment that they do when they're trying to figure out what the intervention should be. So they're going to look at like those types of things first, and then once those are ruled out, then they'll start looking at what's going on in the environment and the interaction with you and your child and all that kind of thing.
Absolutely. And we had another person who wrote in and said, how can I get my son to gain weight? And we're kind of in the same heading there, even though the first one was more of a texture issue. But you know, when we talk about feeding issues, same deal. It's so important that you get help and support, but if you do get help and support, wild success is available to you.
I mean, make sure that when you go to get support that this person has experience in feeding problems. I would say particularly feeding problems with children with autism, because there are people out there, like there's really amazing behaviour analysts out there, but they don't really have experience of dealing with feeding problems or feeding issues. So it is important to get someone who knows what they're doing, or someone who at least has the support, a really good behaviour analyst that has support of someone who knows about feeding issues. And with, again, like the same thing with the kid who needs to gain weight. The behaviour analyst is going to do exactly the same thing, and they're going to help you figure out what exactly are the issues, where the child is at, and then gradually trying to increase their food intake or changing the types of foods that the kid's eating. So maybe the kid's only restricting their diet to very low calorie foods, or just it's a volume issue that they can't eat enough volume, or they'll only eat certain textures and so on. So that's what the behavioural analyst will work with the parent to figure out exactly what the issue is and what then needs to be changed. And then it's about shaping, like slowly building up or changing the diet rather than going from one thing to another and so on.
But you can change it. Here's what I want you to know is that if you work with the right professional to come in, you know, when it's something like your child not thriving, not gaining weight, the time, you know, is now. In a second, we're going to show that Kathy Piazza video, and she works with a group of people, and you can call them. Here at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders, they have something called SOS.
Yeah, we have a number of people at CARD who are actually really quite very specialist in their feeding knowledge. They do amazing work.
Yeah, and the SOS, by the way, stands for Specialized Outpatient Services. So you don't have to be getting your whole ABA program from CARD. If you go to centerforautism.com, you can look at the services tab, and SOS is one of the things there. You can call and talk to somebody about whether you're close enough to get SOS services from CARD or whether there's somebody else. But again, we're going to show Kathy Piazza and another great organization, because there are organizations that can help you, experts who have a wealth of knowledge and experience working with these kinds of things. Don't wait is the main thing, because you can get help, but it will have to be tailored to the individual child. We got a bunch more questions here. We might want to take a break before we discuss all of them, but let's take at least one more here. I'm going to put answer complete on that one. Oops, I have to show that question. Okay. Okay, the question is, my 12-year-old daughter and my 3-year-old son, they're autistic. They both shake their heads and flap their hands. This would come under the heading of the ritualistic and repetitive behaviors as part of the diagnosis, right?
Yeah.
Not all that unusual.
No, not unusual at all. And as you said, it's part of the diagnosis, and generally all kids with autism are going to have these types of behaviors. They often range in what they look like. One kid might do the head shaking and the hand flapping, other kids might tense their bodies, other kids might put their hands in front of their face or line things up and all sorts of stuff.
You know, there are all kinds of things that kids do.
There isn't, so you're, you know, again, it's about perhaps getting some training and help from a professional. If you're looking to decrease those behaviors, the first thing you need to really look at is what the function of the behavior is.
Yeah.
And that not always clear. You might
function, what's the function? This is why we don't look at all behaviors. What's the function of it? There's some sort of a paycheck.
Yeah.
For sometimes it's just that it feels good.
Right, exactly. And a lot of the times with these types of behaviors, that's the case. But also, often these kinds of things can start off being like, I'm doing them because they feel really good, or I feel stressed and it makes me feel less stressed, or I'm bored and I don't have other things to do, or I'm not sure how to interact with my toys or my whatever, and I'm doing these behaviors. But then sometimes what can happen is kids can get attention for those behaviors, and you're sort of trying to stop them, and then they're like, oh, I can get attention for these behaviors as well, and it feels good. And so you end up with more than one reason why the kid starts to engage with it. Or perhaps when they do that, they get out of doing something else. Yeah. They can avoid something, whether that's avoiding a task or a demand or a stressful situation, whatever it is.
Or it can decrease a sensory kind of thing. Both of these behaviors, by the way, my son engaged in before he started ABA. You know, he was a big hand flapper, and if he didn't have anything else going on, he would sit there and shake his head. And you know, I remember one day when I was under a great deal of stress that, experts had talked to me and said that the function of this behavior for my individual son, not the same for all children, but that it was a way that he could calm himself down. For some kids, it's the stimulation of the fingers. And I remember having a very stressful moment and thinking to myself, really, on the verge of a panic attack, and going, okay, what can I do for myself? And I thought, I'm going to give it a try. And I flapped my fingers and I went, it's kind of cool. Your fingers move fast enough that there's a blur and some colors, and I don't know if that's why my son was doing it. And I ask him now that he is verbal and can talk about things, and he doesn't remember hand flapping. By the way, he doesn't hand flap or shake his head anymore, because he was able to, through his ABA program, work through all of those behaviors, and he found other things to do.
Right. And that's the key.
That fill the need.
Because once you figure out why the kid is doing these behaviors and what the function is for the child, then what we go in and we decide, okay, well, how can we have this, what can we teach this child so they can get those needs met in a more socially appropriate way, and that's going to be very individualized as well, depending on why your kid's doing it. But it's about teaching replacement skills, kind of thing. Maybe it's about teaching kids how to engage with their toys, so then they choose to play rather than do those things, or how to get visual stimulation from other means. And you may also, of course, introduce some reinforcement system as well, where you're reinforcing the kid for doing the other things which are more appropriate rather than the flapping. And these are some of the hardest behaviors to decrease, especially if they're if the kid is doing them because it feels good to them, because it's hard to compete with that reinforcement that they're getting from engaging the behavior. And we all know that ourselves, we have like certain habits. I tend to pick at the skin on my fingers, which is a terrible behavior. I also cannot stop myself chewing pens. So I just can't stop myself. And then I also like pull my hair out and stuff like that whenever, not to the extreme, but just tend to like tug on my hair. And they're very hard behaviors to stop doing, because I don't even notice I'm doing them sometimes. And even when I am, they just feel good and I want to do them. So it's really hard. It can be hard to compete with that with our kids, but like you said, it's possible, especially as we teach our kids more and more alternative things to do. And also, like, I feel like once we start teaching our kids skills, they generally start to get more out of their environment, and they start to look around and they start to engage with people, and then it kind of opens up their world more, whereas maybe at the beginning they're a little bit more trapped in their own world and they don't really know how to interact with our world, if that makes any sense.
It does. I mean, I think about it, and when my son was, and again, individual, just because my son did it for certain things doesn't mean that your children do, but I think there was an element of he didn't know how to play with his toys. He didn't know how to play with me, so there was this. And when he knew how to play with me and with his therapist and with his friends, there was no time for this. There was no need for it. But there were also things that were done for intervention that worked and were very effective because they found the function of the behavior. I have to say that. That's really the crux of it. Finding the function is always the key. We've got a bunch more questions here. Loving that you guys are writing in. For those of you who are watching, if you're on autism-live.com and you see it says Shannon is answering, that means that question box is open and active. You don't have to log in. Nobody's looking for a credit card number. You're not giving your email. You just type. And it shows up here, and we have the opportunity to ask Evelyn Gould, BCBA, your questions. We're going to take a break and come back and answer some of the more questions. Loving that you guys are participating. Stick with us. When do you know that your child isn't just a picky eater? When do we know it's time to ask for help?
Absolutely, that's such a great question. And I think the important thing is to think about it in terms of when is it impacting the child's health, their growth, or their development. So clearly, if your child is not growing along his or her own growth curve, so as you recall as a parent, you go to the pediatrician and I say that's the parent star chart. They show you how your child is growing, and if your child is growing the way he or she is supposed to, you get the Gold Star Parent Award. But if your child has been growing along a certain percentile, let's say the 25th percentile, and then he or she starts to what we call fall off the growth curve, meaning he may go, for example, from the 25th percentile to the 10th percentile. That's really a time you need to start thinking about professional services. And the key there is when your child begins to fall off the growth curve, it may be that it's not that your child is losing weight. I think that's what's deceptive. Children should always gain weight. They should always grow as predicted. So your child, for example, may be simply maintaining his weight, but at a time when he should be gaining weight. So that will be the first thing, looking at the child's growth chart and talking to your pediatrician about whether your child's growing as he or she should be. The second issue is your child's nutritional content sufficient? And in this case, you really need to have your pediatrician either look at your child's diet, you might have to keep some records, or you may need to go to a nutritionist who will analyze your child's diet and tell you, well, your child's not getting enough iron, or they're not getting enough of certain minerals. Again, that would be a time when you would want to go and get professional help. And then the last piece is if your child's intake is impacting his health in another way. So, for example, the child's cholesterol is elevated, or your child's having other kinds of problems that are a function of inadequate diet. Oftentimes, selective eaters are selecting diets that are high in fat or high in sugar. And it's interesting because it's not always the case that these children are underweight. As you indicated, they could, in fact, be overweight.
And it seems like when your child's diagnosed with autism, there's so many things to think about, and food is such an emotional issue to begin with. And so people say, well, he or she's got all these other things, then I just want to give him the foods. But we can get to a happy child with a healthy diet, yes?
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. How do you pick and choose? What do I do next? We have so many issues. We have language. We have social skills. But you have to remember that your child's diet impacts his or her, not only their growth, but also their brain development. And so it really is important to intervene if your child is not eating an adequate diet, because malnutrition early on, and again, I'm not talking about kids who are, marasmic, they have the big bellies with the skinny legs. I'm talking about kids, again, who are just, for example, eating French fries. If you're not getting adequate nutrition later on, your child may be at risk for later developmental, learning, or behavior problems. And we have enough problems already. We don't want to add to them. Intervening early is, like everything, critical. I know it's very, very difficult, but if you get good professional help, the great thing about these kids is the vast majority of them respond beautifully to treatment. Because they're often selective, they're actually getting hungry, they're motivated to eat, and all we need to do is expose them to new foods, and they'll actually then learn to like a lot of the foods we introduce. So if you get in there with a good professional help, intervene early, you can make a huge difference. I have tons of kids we've seen with autism who are actually the best eaters in their family. And what we like to say is the only way you can tell if a child's been to our program is our kids eat their vegetables.
That's wonderful. And so if somebody's determined that it's time to get help, let's start with how can they get help from your organization?
They can go on our website at the unmc.edu. And we have a page for pediatric feeding disorders, and we actually have an application for the screening process. They can go online and fill that out, and someone will contact them to schedule an appointment. We actually can do some evaluations by telehealth. So for parents who are at a long distance, we have been able to evaluate them without them having to come to our program. And we actually do deliver some services via telehealth. Now, if the problem is very, very severe, we may have to have the child come to us, at least for some period of time, to make a little bit of a difference in the behavior, and then follow the family via telehealth. So, technology has been a big boon to us and to the families because it does sort of bridge that distance, because a lot of there's not a widespread availability of the kinds of programs that are really helpful for these children.
Welcome back to Autism Live. That was the fabulous Kathy Piazza, who is quite the expert on feeding issues. And if you missed that web address, wnmc.edu, you can be going there and getting a wealth of information about feeding issues as well, because some of you have been writing in about feeding issues and how do you address that, how do you target that behavior. We really want to encourage you to work with experts. There's also CARD SOS, Specialized Outpatient Services. You can go to www.centerforautism.com and go to their services tab. You'll find SOS, and there is a whole division that specializes in feeding issues. But Kathy Piazza, fabulous as well. I'd like for you guys to know that I love CARD. And CARD gave me back my child. So I always love to tell you about CARD, but I want you to know that there are other services that are out there as well. And we're never trying to make it sound as if but I will speak passionately about CARD because that's where I got my child back. We had some more questions. By the way, we're here with Evelyn Gould. She's a BCBA, a board-certified behavior analyst. We've been answering your questions. Love how you guys are writing in today. Want to remind you that we're not giving child-specific information because that would be a disservice to your child who's an individual. And sitting here with your question with just the information, there would be no way that anybody could give you effective child-specific information. But we can give you information and talk about some different topics that hopefully will be helpful and useful to you. So another question that we got, it's kind of a lengthy one, and I'm showing it to you now on your page. If you're watching the show on autism-live.com, you'll see that at the top of the page it says on the left-hand side, That's the right-hand side, sorry. I have trouble with knowing my right from my left. On the right-hand side, it says Shannon is answering right now, and there's a box below, and it's active if it says that. You can write in, you don't have to do anything. There's no logging in, there's no taking your information. You just write in and ask the question. You hit enter, and it shows up magically here. So, all right, and we'll talk about if you're not watching us live in just a little while. But the question is, my daughter was diagnosed with ASD when she was 20 months old. You know, first of all, I want to say congratulations to you for getting an early diagnosis. That's incredible and that's wonderful. Good job. Ongoing, though, it's been really hard to get services for her. We were in Arizona, and now we moved to Texas. I don't know what to do. My husband is a stock trader, and fortunately, and there's some question marks after the fortunately, he did really good last year. And that's kind of amazing, too. The places that I have found, they charge us according to last year's taxes. This year, he lost all of that and more, and I have no way to prove that until next year, and we're in the middle of the year. And the person writes, we're losing time here. She's already 3 years and 4 months. She has a lot of vocabulary but doesn't use it to communicate. She eats only potato chips. It's not easy to discipline her. What do I do? Lots of question marks. Please help with lots of exclamation points. Lot of information here. I'm going to field, first of all, where you live and insurance, and then we'll let Evelyn talk about some of the other things. What I'm hearing here is that you went from a state where they've had insurance reform longer, Arizona, to a state, Texas, where they haven't had it as long. But the good news here is that both these states have insurance reform. I don't know whether your husband's job has insurance or whether you guys get insurance privately. And what I also don't know is whether your husband's insurance plan is self-funded. But I do know that they have insurance reform in Texas. So one of the first things that you want to do is go to your HR director and ask them if your insurance is self-funded. Then you're going to be able to know some more questions from there, because if the insurance is self-funded, you may not have insurance reform for your particular insurance. If it isn't self-funded, you should be eligible. Either way, you still want to continue the conversation and ask your HR director, I need to know, and always do it positively assumptive, right? Because you get more when you do that, right? If you say to them, are we covered for ABA? It's going to be a longer conversation than if you say to them, how much are we covered for ABA, right? Because then they have the assumption, oh yeah, we're covered, and they're going to go look to see. They may come back to you and say you're not, but you know, if they come back and say you are, then they're going to tell you about who your choices are for providers, and it's going to narrow down your choices.
I think I just want to weigh in there is that don't immediately lose heart if the person says I don't think that you are, right? Because this is such a new thing, this whole insurance thing, that I've definitely been hearing stories where parents are maybe getting told one thing, and the person who's on the end of the phone or whatever doesn't even if they talk to the insurance company, the person on the end of the phone doesn't necessarily know. Right. It hasn't trickled down to the people on the phone yet. And that's really frustrating. And I'm not sure. It's just about, I don't even know where. There must be a site. I'm trying to think of the name of the site.
Well, autismvotes.org.
Autism Votes has some information. I'm not sure
about the individual states.
Yeah, we should maybe look into seeing if there's any particular resources for parents to contact about questions about insurance coverage or something.
And I think, you know, different insurance companies are starting to do workshops in different ways. And I know, and we should mention this a little bit later on, CARD is doing a bunch of workshops in the state of California to help parents. But for those of you who, you know, your child has just been diagnosed, or you just moved to a state, sometimes there aren't as many workshops. But I would also ask you to ask your local support group too.
If you're on Facebook at all, I know that there's a number of organizations offering free webinars on some of the topics that I've seen have been about insurance. Yeah. So it might be worth looking for those.
Yes. I know that different insurance companies are hosting webinars to give information that's specific. But I love what you said, Evelyn, because you never want, Oprah used to always say, you know I love my Oprah. Oprah always used to say, never take a no from somebody who wasn't authorized to give you a yes to begin with. So when you have that person on the phone, bless their hearts, they're working a job, they're the person assigned to answer the phone at the insurance company, they aren't authorized to give you a yes to begin with, so don't take the no from them. Move up the food chain and say, I need to speak to a supervisor. And Bryce Myler, who's our in-house insurance expert here at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders, always says start with your HR director. Let them battle it out with the insurance company. You'll save yourself. You may have to jump in eventually, right? But the HR director is going to be able to get further initially than you are. So find out if you've got insurance. If you've got insurance, they're going to be able to tell you, you know, they might say, here are a bunch of providers that we give you to choose from. If they don't, I want to let you know that there are some great ABA providers in the state of Texas, depending on where you are. There is actually a Center for Autism and Related Disorders office in Austin. So, but there are other providers as well. And what's the BCBA site that you can go to? I can never remember.
To look for a BCBA.
Yes.
It's the BACB, Behavior Analyst Certification Board, and you can find a list or a directory of all the certified behavior analysts and where they are.
Yes, so to be able to
not all of them have, I think not all of them have contact details, but at least you can either contact them through BACB or you can probably find where they work.
Right. Now, if you, for whatever reason, even though you're in the state of Texas, if your insurance is not covering ABA at this moment in time, and keep in mind that it changes on a daily basis. There is no answer. There are a lot of insurance companies that have made settlements outside of insurance, but if you do the research and you see that you are not covered, or if you want to start something while you're doing that research, one of the things that I want to recommend to you is CARD e-learning and skills. These are wonderful kind of sister programs, CARD e-learning, to help educate you and anybody who is on your team. If you've got people in your family who want to help you out. In a little minute, we'll show you a Maddie video, a family in Middle America that didn't have access to ABA, we can't show the video. It needs some repair on it. But in any case, Maddie's family put together their own team with church volunteers. And we've heard other people do this with sororities, that, you know, the sorority has to have a project for the year. And so they learn through CARD e-learning about how to do ABA, and then Skills gives you the curriculum so that you can take the assessment for your child and have very child-specific lessons with teaching points in it. I use Skills at home now with my son, now that he's done with ABA, and that's something that anybody can be doing in the gap before their insurance comes or while you're figuring it out.
Yeah, there's a great bunch of people who will help you to walk you through the process as well. Like there's a lot of, I know they have a really great customer service and help, like that instant message thing, whatever that is. They're really helpful, and they can walk you through and show you what to do and help you figure it out.
And can I tell you, I can attest to that this week, that I needed for my son's new teacher that he's about to start school with to get a CARD e-learning and Skills so that she could see his account and be looking at the things that he's working on. And I didn't know how to do that. I should, but I didn't know how to do that. And I had to ask for some customer service help, and it was fabulous. It was absolutely fabulous, and they were so helpful. Alan Ganther is just an amazing gentleman that you may get the opportunity to talk to.
And they also, I think you can also get consultation as well with clinicians on whatever basis you want, whether it's 1 time, 2 times, ongoing, whatever you need, and then they can help you with the clinical side of things.
Yeah. So, you know, a lot of information that we just threw at you. I'm concerned about the potato chips. I know that was something that you looked at and said, I'm concerned about that as well. And we just talked about all these different feeding things. It really is time to work with an expert. But again, depending on where you are in Texas, you know, I believe they have SOS services available through the Austin, Texas CARD. You'd have to call them to make sure.
I think so, but I'm not sure.
Okay. So, do we want to take just a second, because we've got more questions moving through here, but do we want to take just a second to talk about the discipline issue?
Yeah, and also I wanted to comment, you know, it's really positive that you're saying she seems to have a lot of building blocks there in terms of the language. Like she has,
the vocabulary.
She's got the vocabulary. It's just about getting the help to enable her to use it functionally, which we know is a completely different ball game from having words and then using them.
Yeah, yeah, but very possible, given the right constraints.
And you know, you're already in a really positive place because your child already has the tools. She just needs help to use them, whereas, you know, you're not starting from the point of trying to get the tools in there as well. So it is really positive.
And I think that's really important to say, because, you know, sometimes wherever you are, you're like, oh, everything that's happening, it feels very emotional, and you know when you're behind, right? But I think it's important to be reminded of, okay, you do have some pluses going on here. Pluses that can be built on and be used to further, and if she's already got vocabulary, once you get to functional communication, she's going to be that much further ahead. But I definitely hear you saying that you're losing time, and I want to encourage you not to lose any more time. You know, you are in a state where there's insurance reform. We're going to hope that that's going to work out, but if it doesn't, I really want to encourage you, CARD learning and skills. And we know that if things stay the way they are, and heaven knows we don't know whether they're going to stay the way they are, but if things stay the way they are in January of 2014, your child will either way have access to ABA through insurance that will be funded. You can't wait until then. That would be, you know, just a shame, and I hear your urgency here. But if nothing else, CARD learning and skills, and if you can do some consultation with it, so much the better.
If you can get a consultant who maybe can come out, even if you can just afford for someone to come out and train you in how to do the functional communication stuff, that's going to really help you feel like you're doing something and that you're doing something very important, and you have a lot to work with there. So I would definitely recommend that too, that you get help with how to get your child using her words.
Yes, absolutely. We talk a lot on the show. We have different segments if you want to search on Blip or on YouTube about manding and tacting and some of those things to get a better understanding for yourself about how you can help your child to access those things. Really important. Okay, we've got another question here. Thank you so much. Said, this is a great show, first time watching. Welcome. Nelson from Canada wants to know, how do I get my son to sleep in his room? He's 8. My son just turned 9, and this is one of those things that we constantly work on and move the dial around a lot. I am not the best person at this because it's really tough for me in terms of being consistent with the consequences. This is where I give myself 30 lashes with a wet noodle on a regular basis, because I know there are tools, and when I use them, my son goes to bed and stays in his room. But I'm not as consistent as I need to be as a parent. Do you want me to talk about a couple of the things that we've been doing lately, or do you want to talk about some of the things?
We just know that this is also a really common problem.
Yes.
Sleeping bedtime issues are very, very common, along with morning routine issues and feeding issues and all those kind of things. So this is a very common problem, and one that most behavioral analysts will have come across at least a few times.
Yes.
But I don't know, I mean, it really depends on what you mean by sleeping in his room and what's going on, what behaviours he's engaging in, and it would require someone to come out and observe you and see what's happening and why he's not staying in bed, and so on. Because your intervention is going to involve like a range of different things. It's going to be like, you know, rearranging certain environmental variables, perhaps you know, you need to change the bedroom around a little bit, or maybe the child needs to sleep somewhere else, or you know, there's various different things that you might want to do there, and then you're going to want to introduce some kind of reinforcement system, reward system, and have some consequence strategies. And so it's really going to involve a lot of different things depending on what the problem is. But Shannon should definitely talk about
through the understanding and the filter that, you know, this is an ongoing thing in my house. And as my child develops, and it changes from time to time. When he was really little, we had difficulties with getting him to go to bed and stay in his own bed. And there were lots of different strategies that worked at different times for different reasons, if I would be consistent with them. Whether it was a token thing that, you know, if he stayed in his bed, you know, that there were 3 tokens that he could get about if you go to bed right when mommy asks you to go to bed, you get a token. If you stay in bed and don't get up out of bed except to go to the bathroom, you get another token. And if you wake up in the morning and you're still in your own bed, a 3rd token, and you can trade those 3 tokens in for something, for instance. Recently, because he's older, there was a game that he really, really wanted, that was a computer game that I really wanted to get for him, that was very creative, and where he could make his own movie. He could edit and make his own SpongeBob movie, right? And I really wanted to get it for him, but we sort of have this policy that you got to work for everything, right? Because we see it as all reinforcement. He wanted this thing, and I, you know, and I always think, okay, what would I really like? He really wants a game. I want him to get a game. What would I really like? And I said, well, you know, I would need for you to go to bed the first time I asked and stay in bed and not do any talking, because my son likes to talk from bed. I'm in bed, but you know, he's yelling to me. I'm all the way downstairs and he's yelling to me. So we set clear expectations of this is what you have to do, and you have to do it 7 nights in a row before you can get this game. And it was fabulous. I had 7 nights of sheer wonderfulness. Now I gotta, you know, he got the game yesterday, so I gotta, you know, but it's really, you know, it's one of those things, we've tried lots of different things, and if it's not reinforcing enough for him, he won't do it.
Yeah.
And I always have to be mindful of what is it that he's trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I just want to stress that this is very child-specific.
Yes,
and like Shannon said, when you're choosing a reward system, it's got to be very much tailored to your kid. And for some, actually a lot of kids and even people, waiting 7 days before you get whatever it is you want is actually a really long time.
We couldn't have done that to begin with. Yeah,
exactly. And you know, making sure that it's worth it. Is the effort that's required of the kid worth the reward, or is the reward worth it to them, and our expectations, what are our expectations, and so on. So you really have to remember that this is individualized, but that it obviously really worked for you.
Well, for those 7 days, and now I got to do some. This is where I fall down on the job. You know, I got it now that he has that toy, and you know, so now it's moving on to something new. And I said earlier last night, I did the worst thing. He'd already gone to bed, was in bed, was half asleep, and I got him back up because I wanted him to watch the Olympics. I wanted him to see Michael Phelps. Bad parenting, bad parenting. But it was a moment that I think he'll remember the rest of his life.
I mean, there's lots of other types of things that are very research based. Like there's a thing called a bedtime pass as well, which has been very successful, where kids are given a certain amount of passes to get out of bed, and then they can trade in the pass for being allowed to get out of bed maybe twice or in one night, or whatever you're working toward. And that's been very successful and very interesting, because quite often the kids then, once they have those passes, don't even use them.
Yeah.
So there's
quiet some of their fears of, I'm going to get left here forever, and what if something happens?
Sometimes it's about just changing routines and establishing a very consistent, reliable bedtime routine, and getting a child into a pattern, because sometimes I've seen kids where everything's kind of a wee bit chaotic and there's no consistent routine, and so it's simple things like that can help, and following through with routine can really help. So there's a variety of things. We really need to get someone in to look at exactly what's going on in your household.
Absolutely. Okay, we've got another question, and we're running out of time here. So this question, my son is very anxious about school. He does very well in school, and the teachers all feel he may have Asperger's syndrome. He was tested, and the doctor said he was not autistic, but did fall in the spectrum. He throws fits in the morning about school, and it's a real struggle, and I know that's something we talk about a lot here. His teacher tells me that he has a good day and he's interacting. How can I calm him down before school this fall? This is sort of a great question for you, Evelyn, because you talk about that morning ritual a lot, and how it is something that can be overwhelming to families, but that if looked at very carefully, that can be so beneficial and change the way things are.
Yeah, I mean, it's again, like, I can't really give you specific advice as to what to do for your particular child. I would have to come to your house and see exactly what's happening in the mornings, and interact with your kid and figure out what his anxieties are, or what does this being anxious mean.
Yeah,
because it sounds like once he's at school, he perhaps is doing okay.
Yeah.
His teachers are saying he has a good day, but I mean, I would want to go in and see what that meant to you.
And honestly, when you think about the morning ritual, there are so many places where it can go off the rails.
Right,
There's so many things going on.
Yeah, so there could be breakdowns happening anywhere from waking up in the morning to getting into the car and actually, or getting it through the gate to the school. So it's about looking at the entire routine and figuring out where the problem lies, and it may be that there's a problem in various different places. It might just not be one place, and then breaking down kind of what is the morning routine? What is it that I have to get done? What does my son have to get done? What are the specific things that are involved in going from waking up to walking through the school gates? And then looking at each one of those components and then figuring out what you can do to kind of change what's going wrong. And looking at the function again, any behavior problems. Why is he having a difficulty with this? What can we change? And then being consistent. Once you figure out the routine, being consistent with what you're doing is really important. And it could be that just a couple of small things need changed. It could be that you have to work on a lot of different things, changing a lot of different things and helping him in a lot of different ways. But we just don't know without knowing your child a bit better.
Right. And I think it's always important when we get to a point when you're identifying what your main problem is in your day or the thing that you'd really like to have changed, it's probably a big enough problem that it's worthwhile to call in expert help, because expert help is going to make it efficient and effective. So you can turn this around in a very quick period of time and think about how great your life would be if your child wasn't anxious in the morning, whatever that anxious means.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely had plenty of kids who have it's a really common problem, the morning routine. It's very difficult for a lot of families. And then I've had kids, where it's been simply introducing things like visual supports, like first you get your bath, then you get a Kinder bar, or first we're going to do breakfast, then you can go play the computer before we go to school, something like that, or a visual schedule that helps the kids. The kids stop stressing out so much because they can see kind of what's happening and what's going to happen and when it's going to happen. And building in reinforcers and rewards along the way, things that the kid likes, to like just moving things out the way.
Exactly. You told the story before about moving the thing of toys by the front door to upstairs made it possible for the family to get the child out the door. Sometimes it's something that afterwards you go, really? I mean, seriously? Was it that easy? But I'll tell you, as a parent, you can't see it. And forgive yourself for not having 360-degree vision around your head. You can't see it. So
and maybe just changing up when you're doing certain things can help. Maybe don't try to have breakfast after bath. Maybe you need to put bath after breakfast. Whatever is going to work. But again, we'd need to come in and look at exactly what's happening.
And just realize that you could try to figure this out for yourself, this conundrum, but I'm going to guess that you already have tried. You're a very bright person, very well spoken, and you've already tried. And you could spend the next 6 months or a year not making it better, in fact, making it worse, or you could get some expert help, a BCBA who's knowledgeable with this, and have this be different by the time school started.
It's very hard for you to figure out what's going on because you're in the midst of it. And the morning routine is usually really chaotic, and chances are you've got a zillion things that you have to do to get yourself ready and out the door.
It's a stressful
or maybe you have like another kid and a partner that you're trying to organize as well, and as well as dealing with your child who's having a hard time. So it's very hard for you to step away and be like, oh, what's going on here and why is this happening? And maybe it's even about, I know, Shannon, you've talked about the fact that you had to change what you were doing and then just changing what you're doing, so it may not be.
That's always the way it is. It always comes down to that. If I just change some little thing, everything else goes better. It's the last thing that occurs to me, but sometimes it makes the difference of everything. But I want you to know, while anxiety is very common in our kids, it's not something to just accept. In fact, it's something to deal with sooner as opposed to later. And you're not the only one who's struggling with those morning issues. And somebody else wrote in and said that they appreciated my falling down on the job story, that they're laughing at me at home. That's okay. You're laughing with me because I make fun of myself. They like the token idea, and that they're glad to know that they're not dealing with it.
We're also assuming here that the problem lies in the morning routine, and that it's hard because the child maybe the child is getting anxious about something that's about to happen. Maybe it's about the journey to school, or maybe it is about something in school, but without going out and looking at what everything that happens from the minute he wakes up to when he gets to school, it's hard to know what's going on.
And better not to guess. Better to get somebody to come in and take that 360 view and be able to get an efficient behavior intervention plan that will turn it around, and you can do that. You can turn it around. We are so out of time, but I've so enjoyed this hour of nonstop questions with you, and you're so helpful. If you have more questions, or you've been watching us and you're watching us and we're not live while you're watching us, you can keep your questions writing in. We're going to show you the email address. We know where Evelyn works. She's here every Wednesday at 10 o'clock, and if you write in questions, we'll give them to her so that she can answer them next week for you at Wednesday at 10 o'clock. There's the email address. Evelyn, thank you so much. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to be joined by Nancy Alspaugh Jackson for Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. You're not going to want to miss it. Stick with us.
Skills is a revolutionary web-based program that incorporates comprehensive assessment, curriculum design, progress tracking, and treatment evaluation for children with autism all in one place. Developed by the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. Our approach is based on over 40 years of research on the principles of learning and their application to improving the lives of children with autism. How does Skills work? Created with speed and simplicity in mind, Skills was modeled on an easy 3-step process. Step 1. Start assessment. Step 1 begins with our intelligent assessment system, which consists of a series of questions. This assessment is essential to identifying your child's level of skills compared to their typical peers across all areas of development. This includes assessing social, motor, language, adaptive, play, cognition, executive functions, and academic skills. Every skill has an assigned age which indicates when the skill emerges during typical development. This means that each child is automatically presented only with lessons that are relevant to his or her age. Step 2. Choosing activities. It's now easier than ever to build an individualized treatment plan. In Step 2, you are presented with an individualized pool of activities that are directly linked to your student's assessment results. Each activity represents a specific skill that has been indicated by the assessment as needing to be taught. Activities are categorized by curriculum and then by lesson. There are 3 main types of skills: building blocks, fundamental, and expansion skills. Fundamental skills are necessary for successful everyday functioning. Building blocks are prerequisites to a fundamental skill. Expansion skills are non-essential skills, but may provide further enrichment in certain areas. After reviewing the activities available to you, you can quickly add your chosen activities to the treatment plan by simply checking the box and clicking the button. Step 3. Start treatment. Once you have selected and added the activities you want, you are ready to begin teaching. Skills provides you with all the tools necessary to design and manage an effective curriculum plan, such as printable activity guides that are customizable by the teacher, supplemental teaching aids including printable data sheets, teaching guides, visual aids, worksheets, and tracking forms, detailed IEP goals and benchmarks for each activity, brief and visually appealing video tutorials, a variety of treatment progress and clinical timeline charts, and lots more. And since Skills is completely web-based, everything you need is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, in one easy-to-access location. Skills users even benefit from unlimited access to a support community where they can ask questions and share ideas with a skills expert. Skills is always with you.
Welcome to Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. I'm Shannon Penrod.
And I'm Nancy Alspaugh Jackson.
And I'm so glad to have you back. I know I took a little bit of time off, and you had a lot of stuff going on.
Yes.
And so thrilled to have you back.
Thank you.
And wonderful. We had, last week we had Holly Robinson on the show.
Yes, we got a lot of feedback on that show.
Yes.
And
wasn't she delightful?
She was delightful. And, you know, I wrote a blog that I said it was 3 autism moms sitting around talking. And no matter what she has achieved in her life, you have achieved, I have achieved, I said to our viewers that the most important thing for us is being the loving, supporting parents of children with autism, and other children too if you have them. We happen to be moms of single children. But that truly, I believe, we all would agree is our greatest accomplishment, is being successful mothers to them.
Some days I don't agree that I am successful. You know, I have that day where I go, I don't know how I'm doing today.
I hear you on that one. I hear you on that one.
But yes, the days when I can say, you know, I'm showing up for my kid, I stand taller, I walk taller, I breathe better on those days.
And the reason you and I are here is because of the fact that you have Jim, a son on the spectrum, and I have Wyatt, a son on the spectrum. And it really has been, it's been the path. I've followed this path. I always say I didn't choose it. It chose me. It was presented to me, and I believe things happen for a reason.
I do too.
And I'm so happy to be here to share this hour with you every week.
Likewise.
And with our parents at home and professionals at home that are listening.
Absolutely. We're thrilled to have you guys with us. We didn't get an opportunity last week to talk about stuff in the news. So we want to talk about some things in the news, a couple of quick things. I'm really excited about this. Autism Research Institute has partnered with the Schaefer Autism Report. And we have to say we love the Schaefer Autism Report.
I was just going to say that, Shannon, thank goodness for the Schaefer Autism Report. We get a lot of our news from Schaefer. If you do not subscribe to the Schaefer Autism Report,
you should.
You absolutely should. It gives you all the latest research, articles, anything in the world happening about autism. It's a global report, and it really keeps you informed, and you can really see the big picture of how things are in the world with autism.
Now, you subscribe to it on your computer, so you get an email.
And it's not very expensive. It's extremely reasonable, as I recall.
And I have it as an app on my phone, which is free.
The app is free. There you go.
The app is free.
So where do you go for the app? Can you tell everybody?
I just went to the App Store on my Android. I don't know on iPhones, but on my Android, I went to the App Store and I put in Schaefer Autism Report, and there it was, and I could get the free. Now, here's the not wonderful about the free is that I can't look up back articles. They refresh, they put a new article up, and that's what I can see. I can't reference back things. So if you're wanting to have the backlog and keep things and be able to print them out, I can't print out from my phone.
You should get the
other, but it's very economical.
Yeah, you can find it. Schaefer, SCHAFER, Autism Report, SAR.
Yeah, and it's wonderful, you know, so it's a little button, and I push it, and I can see the most recent stuff. It's fabulous. If I've got time, you know, I'm stuck someplace for a few minutes, I can look at the Schaefer and the SAR, as we call it here. But in any case, they've paired together, Autism Research Institute and SARS have paired together to create a free newsletter that's designed just for medical staff. So when you go to your doctor, you take your child to the pediatrician, and we all know, we've all been on this page, right? You go there and you say something about your child having autism, and the doctor says something, and you realize you're not on the same page. They are not up to date. There's information that you would like to have them have, and you know what it's like, where you're handing the information, the doctor says, oh, thank you. And you get that look where they're looking at you like, where did you get this? Off the bottom of somebody's, you know, shoe that they don't really trust. So these are two very reputable organizations that have paired together to make this newsletter that it's for pediatricians, nurses, obstetricians, about current research that is relevant to their practice. How fabulous is this? And they're asking parents to give this information to your doctor and say, hey, you know, it's free. And they can subscribe to the newsletter, and you see the address there that Emily's
Critical
put up.
Research in Autism.com. And any pediatrician, I would think, would be interested in getting this information.
Well, you know what, they should be, and if they're not, I would think that that's a red flag.
Yeah.
If you are in their practice and you have a child on the spectrum and they're saying, oh, or, you know, that to me would be a red flag.
Yeah, I would agree.
I know we've had to change doctors over the years a couple of different times.
So have we.
When I left my work, you know, our insurance changed. I'm with a doctor who's great now, who anytime I say to him, you know, well, this or that or the other, ask a question, he says, oh, okay, I don't know about that. Where can I get information?
Good.
And I'm always thrilled to supply him with information. And I come back and he'll talk to me about it and say, you know, I read that whole thing, and he understands more of it than I do. But how great is that? I did not have that for a couple of pediatricians in between.
Yeah.
And it's a wonderful thing. Encourage you to make sure that you have a doctor that you can talk to.
Absolutely.
Also love about my doctor, it's a small practice. If anything happens, there have been a couple of times that my son has gotten the flu or something in the middle of the night, I can call, they call back within 5 minutes, and they have on their phones access to all of our kids' files.
That's great.
At home, whoever, you know, it's this thing that they pass off. And so a couple of times we've had to take him to urgent care. They call from home so that when I get there, they're ready for us.
Great.
It saves us like an hour and a half wait.
Great.
Makes all the difference in the world. A fabulous, fabulous thing. But there's another thing in the news that some research.
Yes. This one was really interesting to me. That they have examined, at California Institute of Technology, they've examined the potential link between irregularities in the immune system and autism. Although studies have supported such a correlation in the past, this new study sought to answer whether immune changes play an important role in the development of autism, or are they simply a side effect?
Right.
And basically what they found out that changes in the immune system do contribute to autism-like behaviors in mice. Exhibited behaviors such as compulsively burying marbles in their cage. Now, this is very interesting to me because they were also able to correct many of the autism-like behaviors in the mice by giving them a bone marrow transplant from typical mice. Now, they said it's important to note that this was done on mice, but this backs up, we were talking about doctors, and we see a doctor named Dr. Michael Goldberg, and he's very well known in the autism world. He believes that basically the kind of autism we have today is not autism that we saw 40, 50 years ago, where children never developed typically, they never had language, but is a regressive autism, which is most of the types that we see, where a child develops normally in the first year. And he believes that an immune disorder basically attacks the brain and causes the autism. So it's sort of, he has a book called The Myth of Autism, where he believes it's not classic autism, but rather a whole new strain of autism caused by immune abnormalities. Now I do have Wyatt under his care, and I believe he's really on to something. It's a very interesting study, and we're seeing him on Friday. So I'm going to run this by him and see what he believes.
And it's interesting. I think there have been a lot of people talking about the immune system and the role that it plays with autism. You know, I was at a conference not too long ago, I guess like 2 years ago, and someone was presenting on immune issues and immunology with autism.
Yes.
And at one point in the lecture, they said something about autoimmune in the parents, in the moms of children with autism, and this murmur went through the group. And I had just recently been diagnosed with an autoimmune disorder, and so my ears were perked up, right? And afterwards, and I was actually there covering the event for my radio show, and I was talking to different parents at the event, and we would, you know, I'd interview them, and then we were done.
Right.
And when everything was off, the microphones were off, I would say, I'm just curious, for my knowledge, how many of you have been diagnosed with an autoimmune disorder? And it was all but one out of all the people I talked to all weekend long. Now, to me, that was interesting, interesting at best, right? Suspect at most. And so, and we see more and more research being done, and I think it's important that the research be done. And this study, to me, it's so important because for the first time we're seeing causation.
Yes.
There's always been this correlation, but for the first time we're seeing causation in mice. I do have to say, and we actually talked a little bit about this with Dr. Jonathan Tarbox, this does not mean that we all run out and ask for a bone marrow transplant.
No, of course not.
We are nowhere near that.
Yeah. Mice and human beings are very far apart.
Very different.
Yeah.
But interesting that this is where the research is going. I'm terribly interested, you know, because of my immune issues, to see where this goes.
Well, you know, I'll talk to Dr. Michael Goldberg about it on Friday and get his feedback, because I'll bring back that to share with all of you.
Okay, exciting. But lovely that they're doing and there's lots more to talk about in the coming weeks that's coming up. But exciting feedback. But we had the opportunity last week, after we talked with Holly Robinson Peete, to sit down with an amazing woman.
A board member of ACT Today.
Yes.
Actually, she was on the board before I came on as executive director. Gabriella Teissier.
I mangle her name.
Okay.
I mangled it earlier, so I'm glad you said it.
Gabriella Teissier. Gabriella and her husband Rafael Lunetta are on our board. Beautiful exotic names, right?
I know. Aren't they gorgeous?
And yes, and Gabriella is gorgeous, and she is an anchor at UniVision.
Yes.
She anchors their morning newscast, among other things. And they have two beautiful boys, one on the autism spectrum, Enzo, and she is the I guess the ambassador, the face of our ACT Español program at ACT Today, which is designed specifically to target autism in the Hispanic Latino community.
Yes.
And she was here to tape a segment, a DVD that we're going to be offering, and we'll be letting you know about that soon through ACT Today's website. And we'll be sending that video, that DVD. It also has Dr. Evelyn Garcia from CARD. And Gabriella interviewed Dr. Evelyn, and we're going to be making that available to the public. We're just now ramping up that program to see what other materials and things we're going to have help for our Hispanic families.
Which is so wonderful, Nancy. I really have to commend you. That's a wonderful thing that you're doing, because it's a population that really needs some
It does. And in a minute we're going to go to that interview that we did last week, where she really talks a lot about that, about the cultural pressure to have a child that does not have a disability. But in addition to that, we do have a wonderful production intern, I guess would be her title, at ACT Today. She's working with you and me on this show, Alejandra.
She's wonderful.
And Alejandra is available at our ACT Today offices if you need to make a call about the grant program at ACT Today. You can call 705-1625, 818-705-1625. And you can also email info@act-today.org. And Alejandra will call you back and speak to you in Spanish. A lot of times the language is a big barrier.
Absolutely.
And we also have materials about warning signs, where to get an assessment, how to get an assessment, what are the important first stages. That's already there in Spanish.
Wonderful. All right, so let's take a look at our interview with Gabriella, and you'll see what we're talking about. She's amazing, dynamic, beautiful.
Yes, she is.
I don't know, I'm choking. But she is, she's wonderful. So take a look, and we'll be back live with you in just a couple of minutes. Welcome back to Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. I'm Shannon Penrod.
And I'm Nancy Alspaugh Jackson. And we have a very special guest with us in the studio today, Gabriella Teissier, who is a television personality on UniVision Anchor, and she is also an ACT Today board member, along with her husband, Rafael Lunetta. and an autism warrior mom.
How are you, Shannon? Thank you. Nancy, thank you.
You're welcome.
Nancy mentioned that you are a very well-known personality on UniVision. Tell us what you do there.
Well, I'm a news anchor there, and I'm in charge of the morning show. Our show starts at 5 a.m. and it goes on until 7. That means that I wake up in the wee hours to get ready and prepared, and then once I'm done, I get to keep on doing my second job, which is being a mom of a child that is 12 years old and another child with a diagnosis.
Yes, and tell us your boys' names and
my oldest child is Etienne, and the little one is Mr. Enzo.
Yes, and Enzo is on the autism spectrum.
Yes, he was diagnosed when he was a little bit shy of 3 years old.
Okay, and you were on the board of Act Today before I came on as a board member and then eventually became executive director. How did, first of all, you come from the diagnosis of Enzo when he was 3 to really becoming an advocate for other families with autism?
Really, Nancy, it's my honor to be serving in this board because I see that there's so much need. When my son Enzo was diagnosed, it was very hard for me to navigate the system.
Yes.
I was born and raised in Mexico City. My first language is Spanish.
Yeah.
But I also speak German and I speak English. So once I was there in these meeting rooms with these very important people and they were telling me all these things, I felt like they were speaking Chinese to me.
Yes.
I couldn't understand a word, and I'm like, here I am with, you know, with all these things that I know in life, and I cannot understand what they're saying. I could only imagine what all these other families go through. I said, somebody needs to help them.
Okay, and so I might add, Shannon, that we have a program that we've just started called Act Español, and Gabriella is actually here today to do an informational DVD with Dr. Evelyn Garcia that we're going to make available to our families out there in the Hispanic community that are dealing with an autism diagnosis.
Which is so wonderful because we know the statistics show that autism is something that crosses all barriers, right? It's not just something that happens to people who speak English. And as you said, I can't imagine. I know when my child was diagnosed, I felt overwhelmed. And I remember thinking, if English were not my first language, what would this be like? So I'm so glad that you're here and that you are such an outspoken advocate and so involved to help families. What are some of the special considerations for a family that is Spanish speaking when they have a child that's diagnosed? Because there are some special concerns, aren't there?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, services are not that readily available when you think that a lot of our Hispanic community is here undocumented or in the process of becoming documented, and at that point you feel that you don't deserve anything, that these services are not for you, and you just like hide away. Then there's another part of it that is very important that we touch on, and it's cultural boundaries. In the Hispanic community, it's still very taboo to speak about a son who's not perfect. And that is so key that we start in our community to say, you know, it's not the dad, it's not the mom, we still don't know what it is.
Yes.
Let's stop blaming each other and let's just focus on trying to get the child better. Because we spend a lot of time dwelling on it when we should be acting.
Yes.
You know?
Really important.
So,
being the solution, not the problem.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we just recently interviewed Holly Robinson-Peete, and she spoke about, you know, particularly in the athletic community, her husband being a football superstar, how difficult it is for fathers with this macho, you know, not my son. Actually, Rodney Peete wrote a book called this. And so this is very common, but you're saying particularly common in the Hispanic community.
Yeah, and not only children with autism, but with disabilities all across the board. It's only now that we're starting to talk about it and we're starting to address it. We know that there is for years, I mean, we have families that have kids with other disabilities and they've been hiding them for several reasons. One of them, lack of knowledge, and then also, you know, because as a community, we don't have those support systems. So where do you go? Well, rather not go anywhere. You just stay in your house.
Right.
And then somebody finds out that you had a child that is 20 years old and has been hidden forever in the back room. And that's very sad, but the great news is that we're addressing it and we're moving forward and we're putting information out there in Spanish and we're talking about it in churches, community meetings, and schools, and that's important.
That's really incredible and so wonderful that you're a big part of that.
And you have been instrumental. We have now brochures available for families in Spanish that they can go to the Act Today website and they can get those materials. We are in the midst of translating more materials from Center for Autism and Related Disorders for the Hispanic community, as well as taping the DVD today. And we have a fair that you participate in at UniVision. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, for the past few years, UniVision has been putting together an educational fair, and it's once a year, and it's all about education. But then last year, I was already saying we should add that other component for kids that don't learn like the other kids, for kids that have other abilities, kids with autism, but let's just try to give them a little bit of information to these families. They pour by the thousands out there. Last year we had 45,000 people attending this fair, and it's a free fair. You get all the materials for free from different vendors, and they not only want your business, we're talking also you know, free stuff that you can access. So they just want you to know that it's out there for you. And we participated as ACT in Español, and I was so happy to see families coming in and just breaking that ice.
And this year, is it coming up?
Yes, we're doing it. We're doing it. It's in October.
October. And you'll be able to find that on our Act Today website.
Absolutely.
Upcoming events when we get the date.
Yeah.
You will be there giving information, and hopefully we'll have even more materials for Spanish-speaking families that have had children recently diagnosed or diagnosed in the past.
And also for people who just think that there might be something that is not completely right there.
Right.
Because some kids don't even have a diagnosis yet.
Yes.
And we want to find them, because if you find it early, of course you can intervene early and get a much better result.
Yes.
And that is in fact what you did with your child, correct?
Yes.
You started early. How old was he when you started?
Yeah, a little bit shy of 3, but I know that I could have acted faster.
I know that too.
We all feel
that
way.
too.
Everybody feels that way. But you know, we talk about early intensive behavior intervention and when is early. For some people, that's 1. For some of us, it's 3. For other people, it's 5. For other people, it's 22. And I know that early makes us all tense, but early means as soon as possible. And so you did. Forgive yourself.
And,
you know what I mean?
And that is why you're doing the work you're doing, and why I'm doing the work I'm doing, and Shannon's doing, because we want other families to have the benefit of, if they see the signs in a year, get in there, get the diagnosis. So, Gabriella, can you tell us just a little bit about your journey? Enzo was diagnosed at 3. Then what was the next step for you?
Well, the next step for me was, first of all, again, going back to those cultural and family barriers, my first big task was to convince my immediate family that Enzo needed help.
Right.
That was very big for me. It took a little bit of work.
Okay.
But then after that, we were all on the same page.
Okay. And your husband, Rafael Luneta, who is also an Act Today board member, did he have a tough time with it?
Very.
Okay.
Very hard time. Very hard time. It took him a little longer to understand it and to come to terms into it, and more importantly, Nancy, to find his place in this battle.
Okay.
Because we all take a stand, we all take a place, and we can all interact and work forward and to move this child into a better place. But he couldn't exactly know he didn't know what to do.
Right.
He needed a lot more guidance. I think that we as women are more intuitive. We kind of know what to do. He was at times sitting with Enzo, and I could tell that he was so frustrated because he couldn't find the words to tell him, or how to touch him, how to approach him. It took him a little longer.
Of course, and I think it does with most husbands. So that's something that we want our viewers to hear, that your husband may not immediately accept this, that we have to use love and patience, but be persistent in helping our spouses walk this road with us and help us. So it took a while. Your family was in a bit of denial. and then you convinced them we need to move forward. What did you do to move forward first?
Well, we moved him from a preschool to another preschool, a higher quality preschool.
Yes.
Where I knew that these teachers were highly trained, and then I was making sure that he was among the right group of people. Then we accessed some of the services that are there through regional centers, through
Regional Center, which we have here in California. Now this webcast goes all over the world, and some of you don't have the Regional Center, but for those of you that do, this is a very important step, isn't it, Gabriella?
It is, and you have to act fast with them. You have to be precise, accurate, and answer all the questions. Be there on time for your appointments.
Yes,
that
and
is
persistent.
So
May I say
yes.
persistent? Precise and persistent, because many times they're overwhelmed with this epidemic. And what I found was I called and called and called and called and called, and it could take you 6 months to get a meeting. But once you get that meeting, I think we need to look at Regional Center as a partner, as an advocate with us, because that's where we're going to get our services. And don't be in denial about the severity of the diagnosis as well. That's a mistake a lot of moms make, isn't it?
Yes, that's true. And also, well, first of all, I skipped one part, which was talking to my doctor, and the doctor, of course, said this child is fine. Right? That was another big thing. And I said, no, for whatever reason, I feel that it's not right. And it was another mom who told me, maybe you need to have him checked.
And where did you go for that?
Regional Center. She gave me a telephone number, and I immediately remembered it. I just put it in my brain, and I pulled it out of my memory as soon as I got home, and I called that number.
Well, we hear this time and time again, Gabriella. Mother's intuition, if you feel that your pediatrician, because this happened to all three of us, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
My pediatrician told me that autism was the latest trendy soccer mom's disease, and wait a while. And your pediatrician didn't get it, your pediatrician didn't get it. Get a diagnosis. Go to several places. If your gut is telling me my child is not developing properly, go to a place where they'll listen to you and you can get a diagnosis, because you'll need that diagnosis to access services.
Exactly, and don't be afraid of that diagnosis also, because when they called me, they were like, okay, I'm going to tell you over the phone. She said I'm going to give him PDD diagnosis, because he was only 3 years old. Well,
PDD, pervasive developmental disorder.
Correct.
Not otherwise specified.
Not otherwise specified. That's what we got first.
Exactly. And she said, don't be scared of the diagnosis. And this particular psychologist, she was also a great psychologist for me.
Yes.
She immediately started treating me right then and there. She said, the diagnosis will help you to access the services, as you said, Nancy. And so it happened.
Okay.
And from there, I was very close trying to find, well, then I went to my meeting with the school district, which was horrendous. Something again in me said, don't sign the paper, take it with you.
The IEP.
The IEP, the Individualized Educational Program. And I said, and I told the person there, and I said, can I take this home with me? And he said, like, oh yeah, didn't I mention this is your right, that you can take it with you?
Forgot that, huh? Okay.
So I had to take it, and I went home.
You went home.
Right then, that day, as they were evaluating Enzo bumped into a chair in that classroom. He hit his head. He was bleeding from the forehead. Still, he was telling me that he was not that bad. He was not severe. He could navigate a classroom. And I'm like, really? This is an empty classroom. He just bumped into a chair. Now he's bleeding from the forehead. What part of not navigating a classroom am I missing?
Yeah, exactly. So you did get assistance with an advocate or an attorney, is that correct?
I had to access an attorney.
Yes.
Definitely, I had to. Once the school had told me what services they were going to provide him with, I felt that there was so much more that I could access.
Okay.
And I said, I have to call this attorney, and they, of course,
who we've had as a guest on the show.
Valerie.
Yes, she's been wonderful.
And they were, and she was really good at telling me, well, this is what you can have, this is what they're giving you. You tell me how far you want to go. And I said, I want to go for everything.
Right, right.
Of course, we had meetings. We had a lot of, a lot of struggle. The district said they wouldn't provide him with that. We had to come back with with more documents and more meetings, and it was a little bit draining. But I hung in there. I learned a lot in the process. My English got better in the process. And so to all those Spanish-speaking mothers or bilingual mothers right now, I want to tell them you need to brush up your English, and also there's people who are professional translators, and they are there to help you out. If you don't understand the terms, you need to access these translators.
That's so important to point out.
Yeah.
You're entitled to a professional translator at an IEP.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct, at all times.
All right, very important information.
Yes, and you need to be able to understand every piece of paper that they give you. Do not sign everything if you cannot read it.
Okay.
That's
All right.
rule of thumb.
Very good to know. So Enzo got the proper assistance at school. He got the proper placement. Did you do behavior therapy with him in addition to school?
Yes, behavior intervention is key.
Okay.
I don't know where he would be without ABA. I don't know where he would be without behavior intervention. Speech played a role in it, but really all the language that he is accessing during ABA intervention is just already so great.
Yes.
So big.
Yes.
That I would say if there's not enough hours in the day, there was times where I was supposed to choose, okay, do I take him here or do I take him here? I mean, the day has only so many hours and the child has to rest. So I decided that ABA was the thing for him.
Yes.
I wouldn't skip 1 hour of that.
Okay, good, good. Also a very good recommendation.
And also, Nancy, I want to point out, CARD was not the first agency that provided Enzo with ABA.
Okay.
And there's other agencies. Some of them are not good. So you really have to make sure that you're there and that you see the progress of the child, that you see what he's learning, that you see if he's understanding, if the therapist is well trained, the data that they take, how do they track that child?
Okay.
You know, how do you know if he's really getting it?
Yes.
It's very important for you to learn about these things.
Absolutely.
Okay. And also, as you know, we offer skills to our Act Today families through grants.
Yes.
And skills is a great tool for families that cannot access a good program, aren't near a location where, say, a CARD is close to them, or another good agency. They can do skills and come quite a long way with their children, with themselves or a caregiver implementing that program.
I use skills at home and I love it.
Okay, so we want to really promote that and mention that skills grants are available through Act Today. So once again, I think we just want to thank you for coming today.
Yes, thank you.
And we want everybody to come to our website, our Act Today website, and they will learn more about Act Espanol there. We're going to be building services on as we're developing this program. It's a program we're building right now, and we'll be having you again at the educational fair in October. We'll be having the brochures available, and this DVD that we're actually taping today should be available shortly, so be on the lookout for that. And really hoping to reach out to our Latino community and give them the tools that they need. And if there was one thing you could say, Gabriella, to the families out there listening today, the Spanish-speaking families, about what they can do if they feel their child either has autism or has already been diagnosed, what would it be? Can you think of what that would be?
I would tell them, don't be afraid, don't be scared, speak up, speak out, talk to people, talk to the teachers, talk to your friends and family, talk to the people at the church. I'm sure you're going to find somebody who has started already navigating this world, and they will help you out.
Wonderful advice.
Great words.
Great. Thank you so much for being here.
Shannon, thank you. Thank you very much,
Gabriella.
Nancy.
I'll be seeing you a lot.
We'll be back with more Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy after these messages. Welcome back to Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. I was just laughing because I was saying she's just so strikingly beautiful and so fabulous and has this wonderful persona and just beautiful to look at that I just feel like a big pile of poo sitting next to her.
Oh, would you please? You have your own beauty, Miss Shannon.
Well, but
and your own inner glow and your outer glow. I am here to tell you right now, right, viewers?
I got lots of glow, that's for sure.
Yeah,
but in any case, she was just striking and beautiful inside and out. She was amazing to have here in the studio, and I'm so glad that she's on the job because there needs to be so much more information.
Yeah,
and how wonderful that it can come from such a beautiful package like that.
Yeah, and someone that has a lot of clout in the Hispanic community and very concerned about her community as well as the autism community.
And the passion.
Yeah, just yet another activist advocate that all of you are. You're all activists, you're all advocates. If you're making the world a better place for your child, you're making the world a better place for all of our children.
That's right.
So we wanted to talk, we're going to go into a fabulous video here. We talked a lot about the program. I'm particularly proud of our Act Today for Military Families program, as you know, that we launched 2 years ago. We've given close to $200,000 in direct grants to military families. I'm particularly proud of it because having a son with autism and having a father who was a decorated Marine who passed away 2 weeks ago. My husband served in the Navy, and I've had many family members, an uncle who was an admiral, and really the stresses on the military family are so great, even with typical children. So you add to that the stresses of having a child with autism, the fact that most families move in the military every 2 years. They lose their place in line for services. It's really a critical situation. So we were the first to start a campaign like this. Autism Speaks has been supporting us with legislation, the Combating Autism Act, but we help the families directly. And we came up with a program with Joey Travolta, John's brother, who we had on the show. And he runs the Inclusion Film Project for children with autism and other developmental delays. We put together a camp down in San Diego. And it was a 2-week camp designed for military children with autism. We did have some of their siblings and a couple of other kids in the area that did come in. We did it with Cox Communications. It was a huge success. And I think Emily has the video ready, and we can show you how it turned out.
I can't wait to see this.
Okay, here it comes.
Okay.
Today has partnered with Cox Communications to bring Inclusion Films to San Diego. Led by Joey Travolta, Inclusion Films teaches filmmaking to developmentally disabled children.
It's a practical film camp where we take them through the process of making a film. And each group, we split them into 3 groups, and they're each responsible for making a short film together as a group.
How many people like animation in this group?
This is a wonderful opportunity for children to build their self-confidence, to develop new friendships, and it's also an opportunity for their siblings to come and to enjoy the company of other peers in this really wonderful, fun setting.
Okay, so you know what time it is?
Cox Communications has years of supporting the community. We believe in giving back to the communities we serve, and military, youth, and education are our 3 pillars. And so this really matched up with everything that we're about and what we're trying to do to give back to the San Diego community. And so we were thrilled to meet up with Act Today and Inclusion Films and to have this wonderful synergy. 3 organizations really trying to move towards a common cause.
All right, we ready?
There you go, got it.
Okay, you'll be talking to me, okay? So tell me your name, say my name is.
In the past, we've done The Junior Apprentice, which was a takeoff on The Apprentice, The Really, Really, Really Late Show, which is a takeoff on The Tonight Show. And this year, we're doing a combination of 60 Minutes and Entertainment Tonight called 30 Minutes Tonight.
Okay, good. So now you understand what an improv is. You guys get the idea what an improv is? To go with the flow of something, especially in the action.
My son Elijah, he's into movies and he's into music, and so this program might bring out his particular skills.
Amazing. You're like a professional animator.
Every single person here we've met has been so kind, loving, and caring. They've given Nicholas the opportunity to be himself and be around people who have the same passion and interest as he does.
What is it you learned with Broken? What did you learn here?
That filming is kind of tricky.
It was really nice to know how much they were enjoying this camp, and they're with people who are supporting them and are making them feel great about themselves and their differences and their similarities. And I get two kids that are working together and apart and together and apart, so it's an interrelationship as well as a camp and a learning experience.
Everything that goes into the process of making a film goes into everyday life. So they're learning life skills, they're learning to collaborate. And when they collaborate, they come up with a product that everybody can see they're a part of something. They become a community, they become a family. When you make a film, you really become a family.
Are we having fun at film camp? Yeah! You know, we are close to Hollywood. Yep. And Hollywood is always looking for young talent like this.
Autism is an epidemic, and it's not going to get any better anytime soon. Families are struggling to pay the bills, to put food on their table, let alone provide services for their children. And ACT Today is a vehicle of support for these families by helping them get access to life supports that they couldn't otherwise have.
My experience in film camp has been great, and I just really love how all you guys decided to bring us together. What I learned here, I learned to animate, how to operate the plot board. I learned about the animation and filming and making friends.
Making new friends and acting.
Meeting new friends. You can be anything you want to be.
Okay, that just made me well up.
I'm crying now. I'm crying. I fell in love with those children, could you tell?
Oh my goodness, how exciting is that?
And I have to tell you that several of those children blossomed into, I would say, animators, editors. They are now at the caliber that they could go in and intern, a few of the older ones, for major entertainment companies. Wow. And what Joey Travolta does with these kids is simply magic. And we're planning on doing this next year. Okay. And the even more exciting thing is that we're taking the film that the children did, 30 minutes, which is a takeoff on 60 minutes. Right. And then Joey produced a documentary. Those are going to be airing on Cox Cable, which is down in the San Diego area. Right. And we're entering those films in the San Diego Film Festival in September. So there's still after story, so we'll keep this going. And we have a couple of parents in the military that want to come talk to us about raising their children in the military and what this experience meant to them. So we're going to have them in upcoming weeks too.
Oh, I just love that. And for those of you who are watching and you think, okay, but I'm not there in San Diego, I just want you to know that there are more and more of these things that are happening.
Yes. And Joey, I do believe, does the workshop in other areas of the country. We'll give you that information.
In fact, I think they just ended one in the New Jersey area, or it's just starting, I think, yesterday in the New Jersey area. So he has camps, these 2-week camps around the country. I have a friend that I was trying to hook up with the one in New Jersey that I hope that she's participating in it. Her son.
We'll make a note of that and we'll get you that info.
Absolutely. Inclusion Films, though, Joey Travolta's Inclusion Films.
And here in LA, the regular program, not the camp, but here in Los Angeles, in the Burbank area, Regional Center will fund your child to go to that in the afternoon.
And that's the older kids, though, right?
Older,
or is that, yeah.
Well, I think you have to be, I think it's 12 and up.
Oh, okay. That's, I was thinking they had to be 16.
Maybe 10 and up.
Okay. Really amazing, and we love Joey Travolta, had him here. He's the real deal. But I wanted to take a little bit of time here at the end of the show. Should we take a break or just continue on? You want to take a break?
Well, we have a little time. Let's regroup and then we'll come back.
Okay, so we'll take a break, we'll come back, and we're going to talk about what we know so far. You know, where we are in the story, catch you up a little bit about some things going on this summer, catch up with Nancy on some things that have been going on with her, and maybe get a suggestion or two from you. So stick with us. We'll be back in just a few minutes.
Mostly the behavior started at night, but it was invading the day, where he would just speak one syllable and babble and pace around.
When she was a year old, she lost speech. She did never seem to request me for anything, even for food.
He told me over the phone that I should just put her in an institution. I was devastated. What's an institution? A hospital. Yeah, isn't that nice?
He told me that it was possible or likely that Ruffin would never be employed, that he would never work productively, that he would not know that I loved him, nor would he love me, nor would he be likely to marry.
There's a 50% chance that he won't be able to talk at all, but if he does talk, he will only be able to, you know, make simple desire requests. I want, things like that. And probably by the time he was 10, he'd be in a home.
Doreen told me that he would recover, and Doreen told me that he would go to regular kindergarten.
I really have a very normal kid now, and lots of normal worries, but not extraordinary ones.
My name is Deli Popola, and I'm one of the creators of theAlspaugh.com. TheAlspaugh.com is an online support system for families and specialists who are affected by autism across the whole world. Share inspirational stories, find resources in their area. Hope you can join.
Okay, we're back,
Yes,
and
welcome
we're looking up some information for
My
you.
computer just froze.
Oh,
I hate
no.
that when that happens.
Because we want to make sure we give you the right information.
It will freeze in a second.
We'll find out. There it is, the Autism Conference. Nope, that's the one in Phoenix. We're looking for the one in Pasadena,
Yes,
but we'll
and
find
I
it.
will find it. But in the meantime, I wanted to take a couple of minutes to talk about some things that have been going on, because we missed a couple of weeks of just touching base with viewers. And your dad passed away.
My father passed away. 91 years old, passed away at home. I was with him when he passed, which was a great blessing. My father was such an important figure in my life. He and my mother raised my younger brother, David, who had Down syndrome. He lived with them his whole life until he died at the age of 38. And they were just great role models. I lost my mother 8 months ago. So within an 8-month period, I lost both parents, and it was extremely difficult. But they taught me a lot about commitment and love, and how a special needs child can be such a blessing. So they were great role models for me. But there's been a lot of stress in my household. My husband went through chemotherapy for several months for prostate cancer. That, in addition to my parents dying, I think really affected my son. And I think that's something that we need to be aware of, because we met with his ABA supervisor yesterday, and we talked a lot about that some of the behavioral things we're seeing with him could just be reactions to the stress. And so that's something that you all should be aware of, that when there's upheaval in the household, your child may be exhibiting some behaviors.
And it always filters down.
It does filter down.
Whether your kid is on the spectrum or not, it filters down. And I think a lot of times we're so busy going through our stuff that it can be left out of the conversation. And I so appreciate that you're wanting to talk about that, because I think, for those of you watching at home to realize, because Nancy always comes in and looks like she has it all pulled together. You always look great.
I do not always have it all together, and I'll have to admit to you, I've been struggling a lot these last few weeks.
And to realize that, and we all know this, right? But, you deal with autism, and it's a roller coaster ride in and of itself, but it's not like the rest of life and all the other things that happen to people stop. It doesn't. It comes hand in hand.
You're right, Shannon. And autism is difficult enough to deal with, much less put in other stressors: death of parents, death of a spouse, illness of a spouse, unemployment, financial concerns, and basically, you've got autism, you've got financial concerns. So hand in hand. I guess the one thing I urge parents to do is, if they have some of these same challenges, I openly admit that I'm getting some counseling to deal with some of my feelings about the loss of my parents, my husband's illness. It's been, I feel like sometimes, and I'm sure some of the viewers can relate, and you probably can as well. I said to the therapist I was talking to about some of my anxiety, that I feel like there's a tray on my head, and I feel like that tray has about 20 glasses of water filled to the brim, and that if any one of those glasses could fall, the whole tray is going to fall off the head. And complete disaster.
Because it's a balancing act that you're just barely making.
So the best advice I can give for these times in our lives when we have crisis, in addition to the crisis of having a child with autism, the stress, the everyday stress of that, is if you're undergoing extra crisis, one day at a time, one step at a time, know you're doing the best you can. And some of your child's behaviors may get worse. And what we've noticed with Wyatt, and I think I've shared this, I know I've shared it with you many times and talked to you about it, and I wanted to ask our viewers. My son, one of our greatest challenges still, he's made so many great strides in language, verbal reciprocity, conversation, eye contact, socializing more. He's doing a lot of great things. He has a very severe self-stimulatory behavior with splashing water. Now, he would rather splash water than do anything. There is absolutely no reward that can replace that overwhelming desire to calm his system by splashing. So it's manifests itself. We've had to put locks on all the bathrooms because he can't go into the bathrooms. He also likes to make soap bubbles, so we have to hide the soap, hide the shampoo, and he'll splash anywhere. He'll splash in toilet water if he can. He'll splash in a pool. He won't, rather than swim, he'll just sit there like this, so he won't interact with other children. So it's a huge, huge obstacle because it prohibits him from participating in life. So I thought I'd ask our viewers today, and along with, of course, seeking the advice of our behavior therapist, who we are working on different plans, trying different things. But this is a hard nut to crack.
Yeah, the self-stimulatory behavior is the hardest because it's hard to know exactly what about it is reinforcing to the child. You can't get into their head to figure out exactly what it is.
And it's an automatic reward for them. And you can't control when they're in the bathroom. You know, he's 10 years old. I can't be with him in the bathroom, and particularly when he's getting into these preteen years. So I thought I'd ask our viewers if they have a child with some self-stimulatory behaviors that are so difficult to deal with. Some of the things they might recommend to me. I need advice too. So if you've had anything that's worked for you, please let me know. My husband said yesterday we're going to look into swimming lessons again. We tried them years ago, but all he would do is splash. And he's a great swimmer, by the way, but he'd prefer to sit there and splash than swim. So my husband said maybe if we just get him in with a tough swimming coach, who knows, he might become the next Michael Phelps.
And you know, that could happen. That could happen. But we don't give up. And
no,
that's
we
what
don't
I love.
give up. I'm not giving up.
You're in the middle of all these other things, and of course, you know, this conundrum of that you're having all this pressure, all these things, the tray on your head, in a moment when your child's behaviors ratchet up. And I think a lot of you can relate to that at home. You know, and that you're still trying to figure out the solution, recognizing what the issues are, the challenges are, and saying, okay, what haven't I done? You continue to be an inspiration.
But I'm determined that Wyatt will eventually do something with water that is positive. And we can, I believe we can transition that obsession with water into something great. I mean, maybe he'll open a car wash, maybe.
You know, it's going to be something. And I think at some point you are going to figure out what is more reinforcing to him and what can fill that need. But that is the toughest nut to crack when it is automatically reinforcing. That is the hardest thing of all. But I know you're going to solve it, whether it's somebody at home helping you, you're going to figure it out on your own, and then you're going to tell us.
Just give me suggestions. You never know what suggestions from another parent can lead to. They can lead to miracles.
Absolutely. We should also mention, too, very quickly, because we're almost out of time, that you are speaking at the 7th Annual Back to School Autism and Asperger Conference at the Pasadena Convention Center
on August 11th. That's a Saturday. I believe I'm at 12:30. I'm at 12:30, and I am doing my speech on a journey through autism to empowerment, how we can look, and I'm going to be preaching to myself. people. There are days when I get up there, and I have to say, perfect timing, because I feed on the energy of the audience.
Yeah.
And when I meet these parents in my speeches, when I walk through the audience and I try to get to know them.
Yeah.
And by the way, I'll be giving out some I'm an Activist mugs
lovely.
and my 10 Steps to Empowerment. So
if you want to attend, we should tell you that it is under the umbrella of Autism Conferences America. You can go to their website, Autism Conferences of America.
Yeah, and we'll put up the information next week.
Yes,
that'll be the Wednesday before.
Want to remind you too that we don't have enough time to show you all the different ways you can get in touch with us, but remember that you can email us, you can Facebook us, you can tweet us. We appreciate all of your suggestions, comments, loved all of your questions today. We're going to be back next week with some really exciting, we think we're going to have Danny Bowman with us next week.
Yes, who's a brilliant young animator who turned some of her obsessions into a great career.
Right.
And then I think we've got Ricky Jay, the rapper.
That's the week after.
Oh, is that the week after?
I think
okay.
it's the week after. But in any case, that's okay. In any case, we have to say goodbye, but I hope until we see you again tomorrow at 9 a.m. that you will give your kiddos a hug from me.
And catch the joy as it flies.
Absolutely. Bye-bye for now.
Bye.